Welcome to the SureDog Radio Network preview for UFC on ABC 5, Emmett versus Topuria. I'm not sure what they're going to call it. It's in Jacksonville again. If they're just going to call it UFC Jacksonville, even though they actually go there fairly often, they're not numbering those, but whatever they're calling it, it's the UFC's return to ViStar Veterans Memorial Arena in Jacksonville, Florida. It is headlined by Josh Emmett and Ilia Topuria, and those are the only things pretty much that have not changed in the last 72 hours, as this card was absolutely gutted on, I guess it was Thursday of the week before fight week, where 3 bouts changed within the space of just a couple of hours. It is a couple days removed from that. We are recording this exactly 1 week out from fight night, and those new matchups do at least have odds. So we'll be able to talk about them a little more intelligently. Anyway, all that, I haven't even said who we are. I'm Ben Duffy of SureDog.com. He is Keith Shillan. Keith, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, man. How you doing?
I'm doing really well. This is one of those rare occasions that we are recording a preview before the event of the previous weekend. Like, we haven't even seen the Vettori versus Cannonier card yet. So I have nothing to compare. I don't know how that one's going to be. This one, the Emmett versus Topuria card, how do you feel about it in general? What's your general temperature on this one?
Yeah, it's on paper. It's way better than the Vettori Cannonier card. Shout out to Dev, the newest SureDog member, for stepping up on hours notice, helping me out. My other job kind of interfered. I have every time Dev fills in for me, I feel like a Rashad Evans, John Jones moment. Like I'm never gonna get it back. I need Dev to, like, start doing cocaine and smashing into women with his car and stuff. So
Dev's like, what do you mean start? You mean keep?
Yeah. Maybe he has hit a woman. We don't know. That's what. So if you guys see Dev, just tell him to stop hitting women with his car. I'm going to make jokes about hitting women on this card, considering we have Dumas fighting on this card.
Cedric Dumas for the second and maybe last time in the UFC. We'll see. One thing I wanted to say about Dumas's fight, as well as the other two that were changed up within the last couple days, we'll talk about them individually, obviously, when we get to them. But as a whole, I'm at least as excited for the new matchups as for the old ones. They're all a little interesting. I mean, Josh Van is a Houston guy, and as soon as he steps into the cage, he'll be the youngest fighter in the UFC.
Yeah, I agree. I think Zhumagulov got a tougher opponent. I think Peak got a tougher opponent. I don't think Dumas got a tougher opponent. I think Soriano would probably be tougher, but like 2 out of 3 becoming better matchups. And on paper, this is a really good card for a fight night. Like, I'd probably go B+. The only reason it's not an A for me is the main event is a solid main event, but it really only has title implications for one fighter, like Topuria. Like, Emmett probably needs a little bit more. But if you could replace, and I'm not trying to dog Emmett. Obviously, he's a fantastic fighter who's just fought for the interim title. But if you could replace him with somebody else who's like one big win away from fighting for the title, this would be an A.
No, I completely agree. Another theme for this card, it is the card of the prematurely written off prospect. There are a number of fighters on this card. I'm just talking about, Macy Barber types, Justin Tafa types, where I wrote them off at one point. Which one?
Brandon Allen.
Oh, Brendan Allen, definitely another one of those where we might have been a little premature in writing them off, because not only are they still super young, but, have turned a corner or, turned things around a bit. So, yeah, plenty to dig into here. And then there are a couple of prospects on this card that are untouched and untouchable so far. I mean, we got Tatsuro Taira on the early prelims, and he has looked absolutely sensational. Tons of good stuff on this one. Any other general thoughts about the card before we dive in?
No, I'm excited. Let's get into it.
All right. The opening fight at UFC on ABC 5 features still the unluckiest man in the UFC, Zhalgas Zhumagulov, against short notice opponent Josh Van. Zhumagulov, the 34-year-old from Kazakhstan, is 14-8 overall. He is 1-5 since joining the UFC as the former Fight Night's global flyweight champ. He's on a 3-fight losing streak against Manel Kopp, Jeff Molina, and Charles Johnson. The most recent of those, the Johnson fight, was last November at the UFC Fight Night Zhechukwu versus Kudalaba card. It was a split decision. Zhumagulov, I thought, had been cut by the UFC. He may have been and then quickly re-signed. I don't know, but 1-5, gets one more shot to turn it around here. He had been scheduled to fight last weekend at UFC on ESPN 47 against Felipe Bunis. Bunis dropped out. Zhumagulov gets pushed to this card, and up steps Van. The 21-year-old Myanmar native by way of Texas is 7-1 overall. This will be his UFC debut. His 8-fight career has taken place entirely in the Cage of Fury Fighting Championships, of course, my hometown promotion here. He's on a 5-fight win streak. All of them finishes within the first 2 rounds. He'll look to make it 6 in a row here and mint himself not only the youngest fighter in the UFC, but one of the most promising ones. He is not favored to get it done. Zhumagulov actually a favorite here. He's -180, Van +150. For what it's worth, Zhumagulov was also a moderate favorite over Bunis when that fight was still on the books. He was, I think, -150, -160 there. But Zhumagulov, they found another guy that he is favored over. Keith, I'll pop in and talk a little bit about Josh Van just because I've seen all of his fights. I've seen several of them in person. The good news is that Josh Van, at least offensively speaking, is absolutely the real deal. He is lightning. His diversity of offensive weapons and the creativity and the opportunism that he shows at this age, there's nothing I can think of to compare it to but Anthony Pettis, where on the ground, he is fast on the ground. Again, super opportunistic. I mean, the guy's got a calf slicer submission over a not bad fighter in Fury. Then on the feet, very fast, underrated power for a guy who's he's gonna present as being a little undersized for flyweight, regardless of what the tail of the tape says. Like, what?
I said it's just crazy.
Yeah. But good power, considering that he's not a big flyweight. He has all the weapons, like very Muay Thai type, or maybe Lethway.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, like he has outstanding knees, good power in both hands. He is like hyperkinetic enough in the cage that stance is almost irrelevant when he really gets flowing. His problem, he is small and he still has trouble kind of imposing his game on bigger fighters, and most of his opponents are going to be bigger. It's something that if he continues to improve as he has, will probably work itself out in the next few years. But right now, again, he's 21 years old. As promising as I think Van is, I think this is going to turn out to have been a little too much too soon for him to step up to the UFC at this point. I would love him to have gotten another 4 or 5 fights in Fury or an LFA or somewhere before even going on the Contender Series, maybe at like age 23. But he's there now. He's in there against Zhumagulov, and Zhumagulov, you know what he's going to do. He's going to march forward. He's going to throw a ton of volume, and he's going to look to clinch and wrestle. I'm worried that that's going to work on Van. Like, I think Zhumagulov can probably get Van down unless he just walks into something brutal and gets himself starched. And on the ground, flyweight is full of wild men on the ground that just love 2 cats in a bag, scramble heavy grappling. Zhumagulov really isn't one of them. He really does want to wrestle in a more deliberate way. And I think if this fight ends up on the ground, that'll probably keep him safe against Van. So much as I'd love to see Van just strike the UFC like a lightning bolt and, get a first round knockout or something in his debut, I have the feeling he's going to kind of get ground out by Zhumagulov here. Zhumagulov gets back on track. He goes to 2-5 in the UFC, and Van has to take some things back to the drawing board. Give me Zhumagulov by decision.
Yeah, this is an intriguing fight. Like I said, I think it's a tougher fight for Zhumagulov than his previous opponent. But my notes on Zhumagulov is gonna be the same as when we broke him down for UFC 288. This poor guy's been scheduled 4 different fights in in the last 6 weeks, and hopefully Van is the guy that can make it, to the cage to face this guy. I mean, he's got a big family to pay for.
2 of them.
So I got to pick a beef with you. I know you're fantastic at breaking down, and I listened to your breakdown with Dev, but you said something that might be one of the worst things in the history of the Showdown Network. You said Zhumagulov has the worst haircut in MMA. You mean the best haircut in MMA? Like, what are you talking about? That thing is. Oh
man!
When he came out UFC 288, he was a star. When he came out, the fans are going crazy. He might get himself a third wife after the show.
I assumed he was trying to scare one of his existing ones away with that shit.
Maybe. So I thought he beat Charles Johnson in his last fight. I mean, it was one of these, not a robbery or anything like that, but you've talked about it being unlucky. He's 1-5 in the UFC, and I've said this before. You could argue he could be 4-2 in the UFC. He has this like Phil Davis effect going on, where he just, if it's a close fight, he's not going to win it.
Nope.
He's a southpaw with high volume, pressure fighter, marches down his foes, attacks with combos. There's a lot of hooks. His left hook being his best fight, but you mentioned he wants to grind. He wants to get in the clinch. He's not a great wrestler. Like I think I disagree a little bit like that. He's not as strong, but he'll shoot, get some takedowns, hold it there. Like, I just mean like that. Like he's not explosive. He's not an international wrestler or anything like that. But that's definitely what he wants to do, and he's got really good cardio. Like we've seen that with him. Van, 21 years old. Obviously, I'm excited about that. You mentioned it. Super athletic. I just think he's got a killer instinct. I mean, you see the amount of finishes this kid has already in his career. He also fights with a lot of pressure. Nice jab, follows up with combinations. I'd say plus power, which is really impressive considering he's, only 21 years old. He can load up a little bit, and he doesn't like being pressure straight back. I like his teep kicks, though he throws some naked leg kicks. I love his stepping knees. I mean, let's be honest. Stepping knees is like my favorite technique in MMA. Like I say, anytime I see someone throw stepping knees, I'm going to mention it. He'll sneak a takedown in here, but he's definitely not a wrestler. I agree. I give Zhumagulov the advantage in the wrestling. But he did show, like his last fight, his opponent was trying to take him down. He showed some pretty solid takedown defense. Got some mean ground and pound. You mentioned he's got a couple submission wins. It's tough to pick Van being on short notice against, a very experienced UFC fighter. But the thing I like about him, for being 21 years old, he's got some good experience, some good wins. Like he hasn't feasted on bums. He's also at the age where he can make lots of improvements. I hate going against someone that I see more potential in the higher upside, and I see that in Van. Plus, Zhumagulov has been like in camp, seems like forever, and I know that peaking and everything's down to a science. But I mean, Zhumagulov, he has a terrible UFC record, but when you go through his record, he doesn't have a bad loss. Like they took quality guys in close fights. I think I'm with you. I think he gets the fight to the canvas. I think he closes the distance, gets in the clinch, he grinds, gets a few takedowns. I think it's going to be a close fight, but I think Zhumagulov's going to actually go win a close one for once. So give me the Russian. It's not. He's not. He's
Kazakhstan.
Not Russian. Kazakhstan. Yeah, the Kazakhstan Paddy Pimblett lookalike. I'll say he wins. I'll say he finally wins the split decision for once.
All right. Next up at UFC on ABC 5, at least as the card is currently constituted, we stay in the men's flyweight division for a matchup between Tatsuro Taira and Kleydson Rodrigues. Taira, the 23-year-old from Japan, is a perfect 13-0 in his mixed martial arts career. He's a perfect 3-0 in the UFC, appeared most recently in February at UFC Fight Night Lewis versus Spivak, where he tapped out Jesus Santos Aguilar late in the first round. He will look to keep his record spotless against Rodrigues. The 27-year-old Brazilian is 8-2 overall. He's 1-1 since joining the UFC out of the 4th season of Dana White's Contender Series. He fought most recently back in February as well at UFC 284, knocking out Shannon Ross in about a minute. Odds here heavily favor Taira. He's minus 350. Rodrigues plus 275 on the comeback. Keith, I'm definitely going to toss this to you first, but I'm impressed with the UFC for making this matchup because Taira obviously has a ton of hype and momentum behind him, but Rodrigues is not a bad prospect either. Like, it's kind of an interesting matchup of two guys that you could see maybe meeting again a couple years down the road with even higher stakes.
Yeah. So, I've talked before. I love my job. I really like my other job. I really believe that's my calling in life. Like, I'm one of the people, I go to work, I love my job. Not always. Some things I hate, but I love my job.
We're not to the Dumas fight yet.
Nice job. The one thing I will say though, I would quit my job for one job. That would to work for the UFC, but my only job is to set the bout order. That's it.
I love that.
Just it. My job is, you're the bout order guy. Like, all right, here's the 12, 14, 15 fights, and I just say, okay, first fight, second fight, third fight. But give me a whole week to figure it out, because I got to stretch it out over 40 hours or something like that. This fight second, I mean, we're taping this earlier than we normally do, so I'm hoping, things will change, and this fight should be on the main card. This is a fantastic fight. We talk about Taira and Taira looks like the real deal, but you mentioned it yourself. Rodrigues is really, really good. And it's just, they hate the little guys and they put them on early. Taira, I mean, this might have something to do with the time difference with Asia. So there might be something going on with that, which I didn't figure out. But when I have the full-time job, I'll know that better. What I mean? I'll have I figure, of course I'm gonna have an office. I'm gonna have all the clocks with different countries. I'll
have a world map on the wall with clocks over each. I like
all around. You see it when you go to airport or a train station or something. Taira, I mean, this kid is good. I mean, he's a long and lengthy fighter, very fluid, he flows, but he's controlled. He's not crazy with some guys who flow. You talked about, Van's a little crazy, but he's a great athlete.
Mm-hmm.
Taira's he moves so smoothly. He's long and lengthy, very well to pick apart people from range, fast hands, plus power. I love his kicking game, though he'll throw some naked leg kicks, but I mean, just the way his long legs and everything. He does keep his chin a little too high for my liking, something he needs to clean up. But he's really good on the ground. I mean, he's above average wrestler. I think that's an area that he could probably improve, especially being that he wants to get the fight to the ground. But he's brilliant when the fight hits the ground. Mm-hmm. Good top game, very patient, doesn't rush anything, slowly works the ground, very like Gelton Almeida type. Transitions so smoothly, so well. Super slick back takes. Got great submission. He's got 7 subs. He's got back-to-back submission wins so far in the UFC. You move over to Rodrigues. Rodrigues is such a tough test for him because he's also massive for the weight class. He's also very athletic. He's got this capoeira style, but he doesn't flow like Taira does. He is that wild man, but he does it everything's fun for him. Flying knees, spinning attacks, a lot of variety in striking. He attacks. I said this last time. He attacks with all 8 points. Elbows, knees, punches, kicks. He's a guy that he'll kind of lull, not lull, I don't want to say lull, but stay outside, and then suddenly just blitz in, explode at his opponent. He uses a lot of feints to set up his shots. He'll feint, and then he'll explode on something. He throws a lot of hard strikes, but because the way everything is exciting, his volume can be a little lacking at times because he has to pace himself a little bit. He also can load up a lot because he's trying to land a big shot. I like that he targets the body, though. That's part of his game. I like his kicking game. A lot of front kicks, a lot of teep kicks, hard kicks to the body. I actually like when you crash in the pocket and getting close. He changes up. He kind of has a John Jones style where he starts looking for elbows inside. One of the negatives is he strikes when strikes come out. He kind of rolls with the punches, which never looks good. It really takes away a lot of your opponent's power. Just the optics to the judges never looks good. I like the way he grapples. He gets in the clinch, uses his side, will look for takedowns. He will shoot from the outside, but he's definitely not a strong one. He kind of dives, almost like football tackles a little bit. As far as jiu-jitsu, he makes a mistake. He'll jump on a guillotine, and he obviously has those long arms that he's a threat. But he only has 2 subs on his record. And when you look at all his fights, the most disturbing one is the CJ Vergara fight, where CJ Vergara, obviously not a very high-level UFC talent, mounted him twice, which I don't like. And that was because he also gassed too. So that's disturbing. I like both these guys. I see a lot of potential in both of them. I think it's a really fantastic fight. But I'm going to go with Taira for two reasons. One, I don't trust Rodrigues' cardio, and I also don't trust if he's put on his back against someone like Taira that he'll be able to get back up. I think Taira takes him down, works him on the ground, wears him out, and I think Taira gets a submission, I'll say second round.
Yeah, I love the breakdown there. And I agree with your general observation that while both of these guys have really good upside, the specifics of the matchup seem to favor Taira. Kleydson and Rodrigues, I like that you described him as a wild man, because the first, like when I saw him fight on the Contender Series, and before that kind of went back and looked at some of his fights in Brazil, I was like, this is a mini Michel Pereira. And he's stayed that way to a certain extent. And Pereira, the same way, will do a lot of flashy movements, but will sometimes wait too long looking for his one kill shot, or at least he did earlier on. He's become better about that, like later in his UFC run. But the main problem is that if Rodrigues spends his time like looking for like a capoeira kick or a spinning back something on Taira, he's going to lose rounds just to Taira's better volume. And if he tries the spinning stuff, that's also going to afford Taira opportunities to get this fight to the ground. And if it goes to the ground with Taira on top, like that fight might be over. Like it might not even be a matter of, well, that round is done. The fight might be done. For those reasons, I'm with you here. I'm excited to have Kleydson and Rodrigues in the UFC, but this is not the matchup for him. Give me Taira by submission as well, and I'm going to say he gets it done in the first round. Next up, the lightweights take the cage, as it is the undefeated Trevor Peek looking to stay that way against late notice step-in Jose Mariscal. Peek, the 28-year-old from Alabama, is 8-0 with one no contest overall. He is 1-0 since joining the UFC out of the 6th season of Dana White's Contender Series. He debuted back in February at UFC Fight Night Moonies versus Allen, knocking out Eric Gonzalez with just one tick left in the first round. So he'll look to keep his record perfect at the expense of Mariscal, who steps in for Vic Martinez on about 10 days' notice. Mariscal, 30-year-old from Greater Chicago, is 13-6 with one no contest. He is typically a featherweight, and he fought most recently at featherweight at LFA 153 back in February. He had been scheduled for another fight in LFA either this month or late last month, but that one was canceled, and he steps in here against Peek. Odds do favor Peek. He's minus 180, Mariscal plus 150. Worth noting that back when this was Peek versus Vic Martinez, Peek was minus 250. So the odds tightened up quite a bit with Mariscal stepping in. Keith, let me know what you think about this one and how you think it goes.
Yeah, I actually agree with the odds makers on that. I definitely think the odds should have been closer. Like I was taking Peek to knock out Martinez in the first round. Martinez, is not really known. He doesn't really do anything good. So I was going to take Peek. Not to mention Martinez, his last fight was it his last fight? He got knocked out by what's the guy's name there? The guy who does the splits and stuff. The guy with the worst stand up in like UFC history.
Oh, Chase Hooper. No, not Chase. The fighting drunken monkey, whatever the hell his name is.
Yeah,
Jordan Levitt.
Jordan Levitt. Yeah, we always make fun of Jordan Levitt, and he looks fantastic actually in that fight. Yeah. It's striking. So yeah, I would definitely wasn't take Martinez. Peek, I'm still not sure about him. Like, I like that he's a finisher. He's got every win by stoppage. The biggest thing I like that he knocked out Commonworthy, and being Commonworthy's not elite. UFC talent, but he's a solid UFC talent. He's shown that he's good enough to be in the UFC. He's on the gas, Peek. Like he's aggressive. He's going. He's a brawler, but with some big powers. He loads up and he'll overthrow things, which I don't like. I said this last time. He bob and weaves, but almost too drastically, where he's got to get high kick or need. But if he connects, man, he can crack. Hard kicks. He'll wrestle a little bit. It's a mean ground and pound. I don't like that he was hurt really bad on the Contender Series, but what I did like was that he showed an ability to come back, which is impressive. but I'm worried about his cardio. I mean, when you just keep knocking guys out early, you've never been a decision in your pro career. You still have a lot to learn. Move over to Mariscal. Like Mariscal, cardio is his whole thing. I'm sorry, not cardio. Experience is his whole thing. Like that, for a guy he's been on the regional scene for a long time. He's fought in good organizations. He fought in LFA. He fought in Cage Warriors. He's fought in Combate. When you look at his losses, 5 out of 6 losses are guys that have reached the UFC. So he doesn't really have terrible losses. But the argument, the counter argument of that is he's lost to low UFC talents, guys like Sean Soriano, guys like Steve Garcia. He can fight out of both stances. He fights also with a lot of pressure. I like that he looks like he's having fun when he fights. Like he seems like a guy that, obviously his goal is to make it to UFC and everything, but just I think he's the guy that if like someone told him like, hey dude, you're never gonna make a living out of this, you're never gonna make UFC, like he'd still fight. I love that he. I was watching one fight. He kept doing like, what I call misdirection, where you like raise his hand up away from you. So the guy like the natural instinct when someone sticks your hand like way up here, you gotta look at it, then you hit with the other side. Like he kept doing that. I was like, dude, I like this dude. That's awesome. Like some stupid spinning attacks. So that's what I mean. But he seems like he's flowing and having fun. He explodes at his opponents. He fights like a jack in the box. Like he's waits, and then all of a sudden he just explodes at you. But like instead of going like laughing at you, he's throwing haymakers at you. But because of that, he's wild. He throws big winging shots. I like that he does kick a lot. Like he'll mix his punches and kicks in a lot. A lot of hard kicks, really chopping kicks. He has a judo background, and he'll look for takedowns. Better getting upper body takedowns based on the judo style, but he'll shoot for some takedowns. Not the best wrestler. That's why he has a judo background. Just sorry. A little Matt Hughes for you. Yeah. But mean ground and pound. Yeah, he's got some wild scram. I don't know if he's wrestled too. I should back. He might wrestle somewhere, but some wild scrambles. He'll lose position going like rolling underneath for a sub, which I don't think will work often in the UFC. But he has 3 sub wins. I like this fight. I think it's gonna be a fun fight based on their styles. Like again, I don't know if either guy is huge UFC talent. If it is, it would be Peak would be the guy. But I think just styles would be fun because both guys want to come forward. Muscle has good experience, but I still think Peak is the better athlete. I'm gonna say Peak connects on something, and I say he knocks out Mariscal. I say he does in the first round. Peak by first round knockout.
Yeah, not much I can say to disagree with any of that. And for what it's worth, as much as I like Vic Martinez, I had Peak over him by knockout as well, because basically he's kind of a deluxe version of Martinez. Like at a UFC or high regional level, the best thing Martinez has in his toolbox is, one punch power, but Peak has more and younger, more durable. Yeah, like he was probably going to knock out Martinez. Mariscal is an interesting change of opponent for this fight, and he's somebody that, win or lose this one, hopefully gets a chance to move down to 145 and get 2 or 3 cuts at UFC featherweights as well, because he will be a lot of fun. I'm glad that you said that he explodes, because my top note is he explodes as opponents. Southpaw kickboxer, highly aggressive, and kind of just looks for his offense in bursts. Unfortunately, that's going to be rough sledding against Peak. If I had faith that Mariscal could get Peak to the ground, that would be interesting. We haven't seen much of that from Peak, just because he's knocked out most of his opponents so quickly. But I don't. It's hard for me to picture him stepping in and getting like body lock and trips on Peak. Peak's just going to be bigger, stronger. Everything Mariscal does is just going to have him wading into Peak's punching range. Yeah, I'm with you. Give me Peak by first round knockout as well, but it should be a whole lot of fun while it lasts. We head next to the featherweight division as Jamall Emmers faces off against Jack Jenkins. Emmers, the 33-year-old Californian, is 19-6 overall. He is 2-2 in the UFC since joining as a veteran of the second season of Dana White's Contender Series. He competed there in 2018, actually lost to Julian Erosa, went back and won 4 fights in a row on various regional scenes, then got the call up to face Giga Chikadze. That was a rough first assignment in the UFC, but he made it all the way to a pretty close decision. Since then, he's alternated wins and losses. In his most recent appearance in February, he took a unanimous decision over Hussein Ashkabov. That was the Fight Night Andrade versus Blanchfield card. He'll look to make it 2 wins in a row against Jenkins, who is hoping for the same. 30-year-old Australian is 11-2 overall. He's 1-0 since joining the UFC out of the 6th season of Dana White's Contender Series. He debuted at UFC 284 in February, where he took a unanimous decision over Don Shainis. Odds favor Emmers. He's minus 175 or so. Jenkins out there around plus 140. Keith, 145 is about as hard a division as there is in the UFC to string together enough wins to crack the top 10. If one of these guys does it 2 years from now, say, which is it more likely in your mind, and who wins this one?
Yeah, man, that's a good. I like both these guys. I really do. I mean, I know Emmers hasn't had the best run in the UFC, but he's faced some tough dudes. I think it's pretty even, and obviously you just mentioned the odds. The odds kind of implicate that this is one of the best fights on the card. Emmers is huge for the weight class. Yeah, he's a big dude. I like his, he's well-rounded. I like that he's high output, fast hands, accurate, works behind a jab. I love his straight right. I love that he targets the body with hard kicks. Step-in knees is a thing he likes to do. He does make some mistakes of avoiding strikes by backing straight up, which I don't like. But he can get to the clinch. He can grind. He uses his big frame inside to kind of post a little bit and then blast the body with knees. Underrated ground game. I'd say he's a decent wrestler, but he chain wrestles pretty well together. Like his initial shot isn't the best, but he chains things, gets things going, and he's got a lot of subs in his career. So he's a submission threat now. You move at Jenkins. Jenkins looked incredible against Don Shainis. In fairness, that is a pretty low level UFC talent, but he's got some high output striking. He fights out of both stances, cuts angles really well, shows a lot of good variety in his strikes. He gets to the pocket and he works the body. He's got some hard kicks inside, incredible calf kicks. I like that he mixes his punches and kicks together in combinations. He also still went to Emmers. He avoids strikes by backing straight up, which I don't like, but he also, like Emmers, can get in the clinch, batter the body. He has some judo trips because he has judo background, but he's also can shoot. He's got some fast entries, strong top game. He does need to improve his control a little bit. Like he was losing positions to Don Shainis. Like Shainis, was getting up, but I love that he was looking to advance position. Good ground and pound. I'd like to. I've seen him some fights where he gets in, a close guard, very Tito Ortiz style, like sliding elbows. He has 3 submission wins. And what I really loved is the pace he put on Shainis. Like he did not stop. Like he kept going. You asked me who could, be in title contention or be top 10. Like I didn't purposely try to avoid your question. I think this might be the hardest fight to pick on the entire card. I like both guys. Someone in UFC hates Emmers because he keeps getting drawn in a really tough slate. I guess I'm going to go with a slight upset, though. I'm going to go with Jenkins. I like his clinch game. I like his foot sweeps. I like his output. This is a banger, though. Like I have zero confidence in this one. I think the winner of this fight is someone that'll probably rise up my rankings a little bit. My confidence in them. I'm going to say Jenkins. I'm going to say he wins by split decision.
Yeah, completely agree that both these guys have big upside, and agree that this is probably the hardest fight to pick on the card. Jenkins, as you said, he looked really impressive against Don Shainis, and unfortunately, we probably won't know until after Saturday if that was more down to Jenkins or it was more about Don Shainis, who audibly admitted that he didn't belong in the UFC after that fight. Like you could hear him on a hot mic. It's like I'm not good enough to be here. that was a sad moment. Like now I'm all like sad thinking about that. Anyway, but he did look great, and he presents some interesting challenges to Emmers, just as somebody that's gonna be in his face and put it on him and force a higher pace than Emmers might like. And like Emmers is a pretty good work rate guy. Like for a guy whose primary training partner is Bobby Green, he doesn't have a lot of the Bobby Green foibles. Like Emmers, like seems to fight to a much more composed game plan than Green does. But nonetheless, I think Jenkins is going to at least try to make him uncomfortable with pace and try to keep him on his back foot. You mentioned that Emmers is huge, and he's huge in that John Jones way, that like long, skinny legs make it so that he seems impossibly tall and with like an impossibly broad upper body for like the weight class he fights in. That's a tool he's always going to have in his back pocket there. I'm going to stick with the favorite Emmers here. I do trust him to keep Jenkins kind of at the end of his jab, end of his kicks. I'm going to say this fight probably doesn't go to the ground unless Emmers wants it there, but I doubt we spend much time on the ground at all. Give me Emmers to win 2 rounds out of 3 in a fun striking battle. We head next to the strawweight division and a matchup between Tabatha Ricci and Gillian Robertson. Ricci, the 28-year-old Brazilian, is 8-1 overall. She is 3-1 in the UFC. She stepped up on short notice to take on future flyweight title contender Manon Fior just a little over 2 years ago. Got knocked out late in the second round. That's about as excusable as losses come for strawweights. Since then, she's rattled off 3 straight wins over Maria Oliveira, Poliana Viana, and Jessica Penne. The most recent of those, the Penne fight, was back in March at UFC 285. She tapped out the veteran with a second round armbar. So she will look to make it 4 in a row and mint herself a possible future title contender at strawweight against Robertson. The 28-year-old Canadian is 12-7 overall. She is 9-6 since joining the UFC out of the 26th season of The Ultimate Fighter. She is 1-0 at strawweight. The majority of her UFC career, as well as her season of Tough, took place in the 125-pound division. She dropped to 115 pounds earlier this year and was rewarded for her efforts with a second-round submission of Piera Rodrigues at UFC on ESPN Holloway versus Allen back in April. So she's looking to go 2-0 in her new division. She is not favored to do so. Ricci is minus 130, Robertson plus 110. I like Gillian Robertson better at strawweight than at flyweight. I think it solves some of her problems, because Robertson's main problem, of course, is she's a bit of a poor woman's Mackenzie Dern. She is a very good grappler who often lacks the ability to get the fight to the ground against stronger, more athletic opponents, and whose striking is unremittingly ugly. I mean, that's pretty much your notes on Mackenzie Dern as well, right? And some of those problems are solved by her dropping from 125 to 115 pounds, because she's going to be stronger in comparison to more of the women she fights at 115. It doesn't solve all of her problems. And Ricci, I think, is a tough ask. Now, Robertson will be like a good bit larger than Ricci. Ricci is short, compact, muscular. She's definitely more from the Weili Zhang, Jessica Andrade school of physique than, Joanna Jędrzejczyk or Rose Namajunas. Ricci is also athletic. She's explosive. She is good on the ground herself. So all of this just points to rough sledding for Robertson to me. And Robertson is the slight underdog. Whenever I'm looking at, a fight where there's a defined underdog, kind of the way my mind goes is, okay, if the underdog wins here, what does it probably look like? And Gillian Robertson's routes to victory in this fight all involve Ricci making a mistake. And it's hard to pick an underdog to win if, in order for them to win, their opponent would have to blunder. And I mean, unless it's an opponent known for terrible fight IQ, which Ricci is not. So here, I expect Ricci will shuck off Robertson's takedown attempts. Her takedown attempts from outside, kind of like Dern, mostly involve kind of like bending at the waist and running at her opponent. in the clinch, she's a little better. She is pretty physically strong and, has an arsenal of kind of trips and throws and standing back takes. But I just don't think those are going to work on Ricci. I think Ricci's going to box her up at phone booth range in the clinch. I think Ricci's is going to be plenty strong to resist Robertson's takedown attempts. And if Ricci wants to take Robertson down, Robertson just isn't nearly as effective from her back. So I think this favors Ricci pretty heavily. I expect her to win a pretty straightforward decision here.
Yeah, this is another fight that I think is out of order again. Like, I think this fight should be way higher up in the card. Robertson, like, I feel like we've broken it out a million times. She's a weak athlete with limited boxing, but in fairness, her striking did look better against Rodrigues in her last fight. It's still nothing to get excited about. So she's still very hittable. She lacks head movement.
She's no Jordan Levitt.
Yeah, I know. She almost, we've said this before, she almost turns her head away when she's trying to avoid strikes, which is concerning. She will shoot for takedowns, but you mentioned she'll do it without a setup. If she gets in deep, I think she's a little better. If she can get in deep, does pretty well to turn the corner when she grabs the leg. But a lot of times she's shooting and just so telegraphed that she doesn't get that far in. We've seen her try to catch a kick to get the fight to the ground. We've seen her jump guard or try flying submissions to get to the fight. I think she wants to grapple. Problem is she's a topside grappler. She's a very RDA type. He's a good grappler, but from on top, you're not seeing RDA pulling, switching his hips on bottom and throwing up triangles and arm bars. So what I do like about her is she looks for control before going for the submissions. She has some pretty slick back takes if there's an opportunity. She has 7 sub wins, but she plays BJJ off her back too much when she's stuck on bottom instead of getting back up. Now Ricci, you said it, she's like a little peanut. she's barely 5 feet tall. But she's well-rounded. I like her. When she first came to the UFC, I kind of looked at her as a one-dimensional grappler, but I like her boxing. She can fight out of both stances. She does well to slide in the pocket and unload some pretty big shots. She does have, I mentioned this last time, she has a little bit of Dan Henderson in her where she's kind of winging an overhand right a little too much. She also rolls with punches, which I just mentioned earlier. I'm not crazy about, but she's a black belt in judo. She does pretty well. She's one of these people who knows how to use her disadvantage in height well in the clinch. She gets underneath her kind of really solid head position, a lot of upper body takedowns, but she can also wrestle from the outside. She's some nice entries. She controls really well before looking for subs. So she's also very similar to Robinson, where she's going to smother you. But her BJJ is really good. She got 3 wins on a record. As far as BJJ defense, you go back to the Poliana Viana fight where she's tossing up submissions and Ricci's not even come close to it. Technically speaking, I'm with you. I think this is a really good fight for Ricci. If they were the same height, the same weight, obviously they're gonna be the same weight, but if height mattered, if they could only match people up in similar height. But my major concern with her is the size difference. You talk about, if Ricci messes up, that's Robertson's best chance. I also think if just Ricci can't handle the size, Robertson's, when she, gets hydrated, you're talking about a former flyweight going against probably a fighter should be fighting at atomweight. So that one really worries me. But I still think the fighter that on top is going to win. And I still give the advantage to Ricci when it comes to wrestling and takedowns. And I can see Robertson shooting for takedowns and getting pancaked or sprawled on, something like that, where Ricci, uses the takedown attempt from Gillian against her. So I think just the time on top, I don't think she'll get a submission or anything, but I'll lean Ricci too, and I'll take Ricci by decision.
All right. And let the record show that I did not blurt anything out when Keith made a reference to whether Ricci could handle the size or not. Next up at UFC on ABC 5 is a lightweight matchup between Mateusz Rebecki and Loik Radzhabov. Rebecki, the 30-year-old from Poland, is 17-1 overall. He is on a 14-fight win streak, and he is 1-0 since joining the UFC out of the 6th season of Dana White's Contender Series. He won on the Contender Series, first round submission last August, debuted in the UFC in January against Nick Fiore, and took a pretty dominant unanimous decision. He will look to make it 2 in a row against Radzhabov, who is also 1-0 in the UFC. Debuted in March at UFC 285, taking a unanimous decision over Esteban Ribovic. Prior to that, his primary claim to fame would have been the fact that he is a 2-time PFL runner-up. He came up short against Natan Schulte and House Manfio in the 2019 and 2021 seasons, respectively. Odds here, this is another close one on the books, but Rebecki is a slight favorite. He's minus 130. Radzhabov out there above even money, plus 110 some places. Keith, who you got in this one, and kind of how do you see the fight playing out?
Yeah, I just you're talking about 2-time PFL, and I was thinking for some reason I started thinking about Lance Palmer. Like, what happened to Lance Palmer? Like, I know he's not fighting with the PFL. Like, is he still fighting?
He got super mad at PFL and started calling for his release and stuff, and then he lost a couple of fights, and I don't think he was in this season at all.
Yeah.
I mean, given what happened to PFL, he may just be on the run from USADA right now.
Yeah, very good. So check out, there was a documentary. I'm sorry I'm getting way off track with this when I brought up Lance Palmer, but there was a documentary when he was in high school called, I think it was called Pinned or something. And it was a really good documentary, and it was about his dad being crazy, and you should check it out. But anyways, yeah, this fight, this is an interesting fight. Radzhabov, he's a high output fighter, pressures his opponent back pretty well with hard shots. I really like his straight right. I mean, we saw that in his last fight. I mean, he was connecting every single time he was throwing it. The one issue I have with it is sometimes he'll turn it to be more of an overhand, which I don't like as much. He'll also throw in some spinning attacks, which I'm not crazy about. He makes a mistake of dropping his hands. But what I do love is he knows, he should wrestle, and he uses, he's not this great. I mean, he's definitely good wrestler. He can shoot through your hips, but I also like the way he gets to the clinch is he punches himself into the clinch. Like, he throws like a flurry just to get his opponent to have to, block and put their hands up, and then he just uses that to get inside, and then he grinds in there. He's got some fast entries, so I should take that. He's got some fast entries and everything. But when he gets inside, a lot of times he'll come up from like the legs into the body, and he'll look for like a body lock throw. I like that he advances on the ground. He's got some mean ground and pound. He's got some submissions in his record. I think he's got 5 subs. Head attacks are like a specialty for him. He loves guillotines. He loves darces and stuff like that. So it's something to watch for. Rebecki was a guy that I thought he looked really good on the Contender Series, and then he came over, and in his UFC debut, he took on Nick Fury, who's bottom of the barrel UFC fighter, and he clearly won the fight, and there was no controversy or anything like that. That was like you gave. You know what it was like? It was like a toddler eating, where you get. Well, I mean, like you give them Cheerios, or not toddler, like maybe like 1-year-old. You give the kid like Cheerios, and it should take them, if they ate correctly, just spooned it up, they'd be done in like an hour. But they don't. They drop it. They smear it around. You're like, why is he making this easy task like so hard? And that's what I felt like when I watched Rebecki against Fury. Like that was a softball. They tossed him a softball, and he he did. He got ahead, but he grounded to third base, and the third baseman made a bunch of errors, and that's how he reached first base. It wasn't impressive. I feel less about him now. As far as his style, he's a short, compact fighter, southpaw, a very bob and weave heavy style. He's taking a lot of damage, which I don't like. Very hittable guy. Offensively, I like that he works the body. Plus power. He's got 8 KOs. He throws everything in his punches. He's trying to knock you out with every single punch. Now, he can wrestle, and that's because he's so physically strong. I mean, you go back to Contender Series, he picked up and slammed his opponent. Pretty good top control. Looks to, pass on the ground, good ground and pound. He has 6 submission wins, but he looked like he faded fast against Fury. Even he won the fight. He was gassed out against Fury, he was a guy just asking to be sacrificed, and and Rebecki wasn't feeling it, I guess. Rebecki has the physical tools, but I can't get that Fury fight. And again, that UFC debut is coming over from Europe and everything, so that might, there's more to it than we just see on fight night. But he gasses and he's hittable, so I think he's going to struggle with, this is a big step on competition from Fury. Radzhabov, I think Radzhabov might actually win the wrestling exchanges. I think he's going to also catch him on the feet with some good shots. I'm going to say Rebecki starts to fade late, and I think Radzhabov. I was going to say like a late stoppage, but I'll say he wins a decision. Give me Radzhabov by decision.
Once again, I should have gone first because I smell upset all over this one as well. And a lot of it is down to how pedestrian Rebecki looked against Nick Fury. I'm glad you pointed that out, because I'm pretty sure that was a 30-27 fight across the board, and that doesn't convey how much he struggled late against a guy that you pointed out was, I mean,
it's like, sorry to interrupt you. It's like college football. It's week 1 and you got Ohio State's the 5 seed and they're playing
they're playing like Nebraska School of Massage Therapy.
They're playing that absolutely like squash match, and they still win, but it's like 17-7. You're like
this was supposed to be 70-7.
Yeah, that's what I felt like. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, that's
right now. There's a listener that is absolutely pissed off, and that she's going to mention it in the comments every single week how much I suck. Okay, carry on.
It's one of our trademarks.
Ben, is that your burner account?
Yeah, I'm just on my phone. Rebecki, he is powerful and he is pretty athletic, but he looks like he should be even more powerful and athletic than he is. Like, if Michael Chandler ever decides to make a biopic of himself and they need someone to do the stunts, they could throw Rebecki in as a body double for Michael Chandler. I mean, they'd have to do something about the Alexander Slemenko hairline, but Rebecki is built almost exactly like Michael Chandler. And he's not Michael Chandler in any wise, but he does have that similarity in that he finishes some takedowns that he probably shouldn't be able to just through sheer power. Like, obviously Chandler has far greater fundamentals, but the same thing where, you sprawled right on this, but I'm just going to lift you up and throw you across the cage anyway. Like, Rebecki has a little bit of that. I think part of the reason he gasses, aside from the fact that he's clearly carrying a ton of muscle, is that he swings so hard on everything. He's built to gas out. And I think that's bad news against Radzhabov, who, if nothing else, he came to the UFC showing that he can be competitive in a pretty highly paced 5-round fight if it comes to it. Yeah, I think this is just kind of tailor-made for Radzhabov to maybe struggle early, maybe get taken down, maybe get caught with a couple of punches, but survive the first round and be able to pull ahead and put a pace on Rebecki as Rebecki gets tired. So I have Radzhabov by decision as well in this one, in a mild upset. Next up, we head to the welterweight division for the welterweight debut of former middleweight Wellington Turman. And as if just to mess with the guy, the UFC decided to book him against the largest welterweight on the planet, a guy that actually I think will be taller than any of the middleweights that Turman fought in the UFC, as it is Randy Brown welcoming him to his new division. Brown, the 32-year-old Jamaican, is 16-5 overall. He's 10-5 in the UFC. He did lose his last time out, got choked out in the first round by super prospect / rising contender Jack Della Maddalena. That was at UFC 284 back in February. Prior to that, Brown had 4 wins in a row, stretching back over 2 years. You have to look all the way back to summer of 2020 for his last loss before the Della Maddalena loss. That was against Vicente Luque. So Brown looking to get back on track here, looking to reestablish his momentum that had him as a rising fringe contender in this division. And standing in his way will be Turman. 26-year-old Brazilian is 18-6 overall. He is 3-4 in the UFC. Again, all of those fights contested at middleweight. The most recent of them was a unanimous decision loss to Andre Petroski at UFC 281 last November. He took some time. He's been at Teixeira MMA and Fitness for a while now, dropped from middleweight to welterweight, steps in here for his first assignment, and he is a substantial underdog. Brown is minus 250 as the favorite, Turman plus 210 on the comeback. Keith, tell me how you think New England's own Wellington Turman does against Brown, and how you think and if you like him any better at welterweight than at middleweight, period.
Yeah, if he wins, we'll claim him as our own. If he loses, he's
some Brazilian.
Yeah, I'll say this about him: like, I didn't think he needed to go down in weight. Like, he wasn't. I mean, he might have been a little undersized, but I definitely don't think he needed to go down in weight. But I love when the UFC does this. I love, like you already mentioned, like, I love when the UFC guys like, yeah, I think a little small. Okay, go down in weight. Okay, go against the guy who's bigger than your last opponent. what a dick move. Yeah, and obviously Randy Brown is such a long and lengthy fighter.
Here, let me throw something out real quick. Sure. Turman's last 3 opponents at 185: Andre Petroski, Misha Serkinov, Sam Alvey. Randy Brown can rest his drink on all 3 of those guys' heads.
Yeah.
But
was it Petroski, Alvey, and who was the third one?
Misha Serkinov.
Oh yeah.
And Serkinov,
like, not Sam Alvey, even though he's actually the guy who's Serkinov's fought at 205 too, but like Serkinov and especially Andre Petroski, that they're diesel guys. Like like I still think, like, if you were at a bar and you're like sizing the guy up, and like, oh, one of your friends are like gonna like fight, and you're in your group and they're in their group, and you're like sizing which guy up. You see Serkinov, you see Petroski, and you see like Randy Brown like a foot taller than them. Like all right, I'm grabbing that guy. Like, I'm still grabbing Randy Brown.
Yeah. I mean, Brown's getting picked first if there's a volleyball game.
Yeah.
If I see Serkinov in a bar, I'm going to assume he's a bouncer.
Yeah. Petroski too.
Yeah, Petroski too, for sure. Yeah.
Like, I'm 100% confident Petroski's been a bouncer in his life. Like, absolutely.
College bars in Jersey. Yeah, he's probably
100%.
He's either been a bouncer or been 86 from like every bar in New Jersey.
Yeah. All right, let's Randy Brown, obviously we joke about, he can change the light bulb for you if you need him. Yeah, he's a rangy striker. He moves around the cage very well with good footwork. He's long range that he keeps with his jab, bit of like an up jab. He's got quick hands. Really like his kicking game. He's got those long legs that he uses to keep his distance with teep kicks and stuff. But because of his long legs, he's open to calf kicks. I mean, go back to like the Vicente Luque fight. Luque beat him up and dropped him with leg kicks. I also like he's very Neil Magny, where it's like, if he's not winning from the outside, he'll crash the pocket, he'll get to the clinch, he'll use that size in the clinch. Strong, nice knees inside. He'll look for takedowns. I need to give somebody else credit, but I always say like Michael Chiesa style, where they would use those long arms. But Randy Brown, obviously, the same way. He also likes body lock takedowns. He needs to control a little bit better, but he has 4 subs and he can be creative with it. And he's really improved. Like, one of his weaknesses early in his career was getting stuck on bottom. That's not the case. He does pretty well to get back up. Now, Turman on the feet, volume striker, quick hands, decent pop. He loves to slide in the pocket and throw down, which it's going to be tougher at welterweight than it is at middleweight. Just this one fight. After that, it'll probably be a little easier. He does load up on his shots, which I don't like, and leaves himself to be countered because he has a lot of tells. He also, I pointed this out before, is like he doesn't read chamber. Like he kind of does like a scooping motion, which is very concerning. Something I'm sure like Alex Pereira will probably clean up on him. If he hasn't already. He mixes punches and kicks well together. I like. He throws a lot of kicks. He'll throw occasional spinning attack, which I don't like. He's not the best wrestler, and he's definitely a terrible defensive wrestler. But he's an overall good grappler. Like, if he ends up, scramble happens, he ends up on top. He's a BJJ black belt. I mean, like, even go back like the Bruno Silva fight. Like, before getting knocked out by Bruno Silva, he was out grappling him. He quickly submitted Misha Serkinov, which I want to give him credit, but I think Misha Serkinov is, I think pretty safe that he's a shot fighter. But he almost caught Andre Petroski in a guillotine, which would have been really impressive. But I'm worried about his chin. I mean, like, go back to like He got knocked out by Bruno. He got Indra Sanchez knocked him out. And then even like Serkinov, who shot, he kind of slowed down. He got tired. So despite moving down, he's still going to be the smaller fighter. I think he struggles to get inside on Rennie Brown. I think he'll look for some takedowns, but I don't think he'll be able to get Brown down. I think if there's a takedown, I think Brown might even be the better wrestler of the two, and he gets it to the ground. And I think Brown actually would do pretty well in a grappling match. I see Brown hurting him in the clinch. I see him landing some kicks from the outside. I think Turman is tough enough that he'll make it to the decision, but I like Brown pretty convincingly. Give me Brown by decision.
Yeah, not much to add on this end. I'm honestly, whatever benefit Turman accrues by moving down to a weight class that he feels is more suitable to his body, welterweight is such a deeper and more difficult weight class than middleweight that, I mean, I don't think he's a top 15 guy in either division, but if I had to pick one, it's middleweight. If he stayed at middleweight, managed to win 3 fights in a row, he's scraping the bottom of the rankings. At welterweight, he might have to win 7 in a row to do that, and that ain't happening.
There's only one reason why he got out of the weight class. Because Bo Nickel's in the weight class.
Ding, 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 for one. There you go. That's your free space on the middle of your bingo card.
I'm telling you right now, it's going to be like parting of the Red Sea. There's going to be a whole bunch of people going down, a whole bunch of people going up.
Yep. Bo Nickel's cleared out the division, and he's only fought once. Like, everybody just leaves. Yeah, there's not going to be any real safe place for Turman here, because as you mentioned, Brown is really good at, if you are able to get inside of his jab and kicking range, he'll close the rest of the distance for you, grab a clinch. He's a bully in the clinch. I mean, when you're that tall and you're 75% legs, it gets real easy to knee people in the chest, knee people in the ribs. I think this is going to be a decision win for Brown, though. I mean, a stoppage late wouldn't surprise me either, because Turman, for a 26-year-old, has taken a lot of punishment. But give me Brown by a pretty lopsided decision here, where he beats up on Turman pretty well over the course of 3 rounds. Next up at UFC on ABC 5, Keith, if you got your dream job and you were allowed to set the bout order of every UFC card, you weren't the matchmaker, you didn't get to book the matches, you just get to put them on the card. We have one unranked heavyweight slobber knocker on this card. It is Austen Lane versus Justin Tafa. Where would you put it on this card? And in the garbage is not allowed as an answer.
Yeah, I wouldn't put it. Yeah, like, mind you, you asked me to do a 40-hour job in right on the spot, so that's gonna be tough. So
and really, I mean, the entire 40 hours that week would be trying to figure out where to put Austen Lane versus Justin Tafa. Like, all the rest of it kind of falls into place.
I probably would have it above the 2 replacements actually, I would put it above the 3 replacements we just got this week. So those 3 would be below it. So Zhumagulov, Van, Peak, Mariscal, and Brundage, and Dumas. Like I Dumas. I would have those 3 definitely underneath it. But I'd probably have about fourth from the top.
Okay. At any rate, Lane, 35-year-old Floridian, is 12-3 overall. He will be making his UFC debut after his second appearance on Dana White's Contender Series. He was in the first episode of the second season, where he got knocked out by Greg Hardy, part of Hardy's long and winding road to the UFC.
Who would have guessed at that moment that the guy in the UFC would be Austen Lane, and the guy getting knocked out every single week would be Greg Hardy?
I wouldn't have dared to dream it. He got his second chance on the Contender Series last September against Richard Jacoby, knocked him out late in the first round. That was good enough to punch his ticket to the big octagon, where again he will make his debut this Saturday. Waiting for him will be Tafa. 29-year-old Australian is 6-3 overall. He's 3-3 in the UFC, and he is on a 2-fight win streak. Both of them sub 2-minute knockouts of Harry Hunsucker and Parker Porter. The most recent of those, the Porter fight, was at UFC 284 in February. So improbably, Justin Tafa looking to make it 3 in a row in the UFC, and he is a moderate favorite to get it done. He is -180, Lane around +150. as your underdog. Keith, I'm not sure whether Justin Tafa has gotten better or he's just sort of found his level and gotten down to, I mean, you can make the argument. Here's his UFC run. Yorgan De Castro, Juan Adams, Carlos Felipe, Jared Vandera, Harry Hunsucker, Parker Porter. If you throw Chase Sherman in there, he has the complete set of maybe the 7 worst heavyweights in the UFC.
Yeah. Let's talk about Yorgan De Castro for a second. His last 2 fights, he lost to Danilo Marquez, where Danilo Marquez did not land a punch. He lost a 15-minute decision just on kicks. And then he lost to who did he lose to last night? Dennis Gulstoff, or however you say his Denise Gulstoff. He got knocked out in 18 seconds, setting the record for the PFL. Jeez, poor Yorgan De Castro, the pride and joy of Cape Verde. All right, sorry, what fight are we talking about? Oh, Justin Tafa versus Austen Lane. Justin Tafa, southpaw. I mean, he's humongous heavyweight. He's as big as they are on the roster. I mean, he's got to cut down to make heavyweight. Definitely a boxer. I'd say he's got pretty fast hands for heavyweight. I love his uppercut. He's got some serious big power. His last knockout, the step back left hand, was a thing of beauty. He also landed a high kick against Harry Hunsucker. I'll say this about Tafa. Like, I don't know how his UFC run will finish. Like, I definitely don't. I mean, we haven't seen him improve his ground game at all, but like his knockouts are fantastic though. Like the highs of his UFC career are really fun. Now he has a lot of defensive flaws, lacks head movements, kind of ducks behind his forearms. You know, he can be a little too aggressive. Been knocked out by a guy like Yorgan De Castro, but I mean his ground game is bad. I mean, in fairness, last time we saw someone try to take him down, Harry Hunsucker, he was able to get behind, and he almost got a submission in that. So I'll give him credit for that. Now, Austen Lane, he's the opposite. He's not a very big heavyweight. Like, I mean, he's not small or anything, but he's not. When I was watching film of him this week, I'm like, wow, he's actually smaller than I remembered. Like, for some reason, I thought he was a giant too, and he's not.
Well, he's tall, but yeah, he's not heavy.
But what does he weigh in at?
He weighs in around 230, 240.
Okay, so and like, yeah, so he's like, you know, about average heavyweight, but yeah, probably because he's tall, you know, and he obviously has the frame isn't as like, you know, the size and the muscles. I thought he was a monster, probably because he doesn't he have like a football background too?
No, that was the other guy that Hardy beat on the contender.
Oh, it was another guy.
Tabaris Gordon, yeah.
Yeah, I always mix up guys who had like, you know, I think a guy like Eric Anders. I just assumed like someone like that would have a football background, but I don't think they ever mentioned anything about it. Or
yeah, I mean,
Derek Brunson. I'm not joking. Derek Brunson. There's the Owen St. Preux. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Anders, he probably played at like some small college, and the UFC doesn't even bother mentioning it.
Probably that team that Ohio State beat 17-7 instead of 70. Yeah. So Lane, he's not very big, but he's pretty athletic. Like, he moves. But that's probably why I thought he was a football player. Maybe. You know, he's raw though on the feet. Like, he's not a very technical boxer. He's more just like, I'm a good athlete. He drops his hands. He keeps his chin high in the air. He does throw a lot of kicks. He throws some teep kicks, but you know, a lot of his kicks are naked, leaving him up for counter. I haven't seen much of his wrestling, but I've seen his defense wrestling. It's kind of weak. You go back to like the Contender Series. He was mounted in the Contender Series, and but when he ended up on top, he had some really mean ground and pound. I mean, he actually got the knockout from the ground and pound. Perhaps Lane has, you know, more of a ground game than I know of, and I'm thinking that's definitely, he's got to know that's the best avenue for victory for him is to try to take Tafa down. But I'm gonna go the other way. I know that Tafa can crack. So I say Lane throws a naked leg kick and Tafa just times it perfectly and just cleans him up. So I say he does very early. I say he puts Lane out in the very first. I'll say the first minute of the first round.
Man, I know that disagreement on at least on a lot of preview and prediction type shows is what really fuels the masses, but we're not disagreeing on much here. Tafa, he is still a limited heavyweight. I asked it rhetorically when I was introducing these guys, but I really do think Tafa's recent success is just a matter of him kind of finding his spot against the worst heavyweights in the UFC. Tafa will go 500, and when he wins, he's gonna knock them into next week. It's like he's built and looks like Mark Hunt, but he only has one thing Mark Hunt has, which is like a massive right hand. And honestly, you mentioned the kind of like step back hook that he knocked out Porter with is a very Mark Hunt type thing. Just he doesn't have any of the rest of it. Like Mark Hunt's just weird instinctive survivability on the ground, the actually extremely subtle and effective defense on the feet that Hunt had for a lot of his career. Tafa doesn't have any of that. He's just a big slugger. I think that's going to be enough against Lane. Lane is tall, aggressive, leaves his chin out there. He's just waiting to get clocked by Tafa. And I think that you might have called it. I'm not confident enough to say within the first minute, but I think it's very likely it comes off of an ill-advised leg kick and Tafa just comes right over the top and puts Lane out. Give me Tafa by first round knockout here as well. Next up from Jacksonville. Not sure yet whether this is going to be the top prelim, the main card opener, or something else entirely if the whole card ends up getting shuffled this week. But wherever it falls, it is a high stakes welterweight matchup between Neil Magny and Phil Rowe. Magny, the 35-year-old Haitian American by way of Chicago, is 27-10 overall. He is 20-9 since joining the UFC out of season 16 of The Ultimate Fighter. He's coming off a loss. In fact, he's coming off 2 losses in his last 3 fights, though in his defense, they were against Shavkat Rakhmonov and Gilbert Burns, 2 top 10 fighters. His most recent loss, the Burns loss, was a first-round submission at UFC 283 in January. So he'll be looking to get back in good graces here. Opposing him will be Rowe. The 32-year-old New Yorker is 10-3 overall. He is 3-1 since joining the UFC out of season 3 of Dana White's Contender Series. He dropped his UFC debut to Gabe Green back just a little over 2 years ago. Since then, he has back-to-back-to-back knockouts of Orion Cosey, Jason Witt, and Nico Price. The most recent of those, the Price fight, was back in December at UFC on ESPN, Thompson versus Holland. Magny is a favorite here. He's minus 150 or so. Rowe plus 120 as your underdog. Keith, 2 tall, lanky welterweights. It's Jamaica versus Haiti. It's Magny versus Rowe. It's the grizzled veteran versus the kind of surprising, rising younger prospect. Who wins this one?
Yeah, and to add to the similarities, I think it's also like, Ultimate Fighter guy and Contender Series where, neither guy came in to the UFC with a lot of buzz and kind of both overachieved. Now, obviously, Magny to a much different scale and much longer than Rowe has, but there obviously, besides their physical physique, there's a lot of backstory that's similar. One thing that Neil Magny, like, what a good dude this guy is. He's the ultimate company guy, because if he wasn't, he'd walk into the UFC office and just like flip somebody's table and go like, why the hell am I underneath Cody Brundage in Dumas? Now, again, we're taping so early, so maybe it'll get changed. But now, speaking, if this happens, like the Neil Magny, all the stuff he's done for the company, like it'd be like the guy who's he's been in the same office for like 20 years and doing it, and then like the new like 22-year-old who got the same level job, then he becomes a supervisor 6 months later. Like, what? Yeah. Anyways, back to this fight. So, anybody who's seen these shows, they know I'm a Magny fan. Like, he's just my kind of guy, like an overachiever. I always root for those kind of guys. Now, he won't beat the elite of the division, but he's gonna beat everybody else. That's just what he is. Now, he isn't the most skilled fighter, but he just makes up for it for being like being Neil Magny, like being the ultimate G. Like, he's a volume striker who just turns up the volume when his opponent starts to fade. He's a fighter whose cardio is the ultimate tool. It's his best tool. He'll start off at a normal pace, but by the 3rd round, it's like a full sprint. he might need volume because, he's looking like he's starting to lose some speed. I mean, we saw that against Daniel Rodrigues, like he wasn't that fast. Max Griffin, wasn't that fast. Shavkat Rakhmonov, I mean, it is what it is. He got his brakes beat off, but so be it. But his will to win is so strong that when it gets hard, he doesn't back down. Now, he broke Danny Rodrigues with his mentality. He's a really intelligent fighter that uses his physical tools so well. And let me back up again about his mentality, because I know some people say like, oh my God, Gilbert Burns ran right through him, and Rakhmonov ran right through him, and Chiesa and RDA. But it's like, if Magny didn't have the mentality that he has because of his lack, he obviously has a physical tools being so tall, but like just like his lack of athleticism and stuff, he'd probably be a regional fighter. Yeah. But he's like a top 15 guy in the world for a very long time based on it. Now he's got a good jab, doesn't really load up, or he's kind of just quick, no tells. I love his teep kicks. It's been a while ago, but like his calf kicks are really good. Go back to like the Anthony Rocco Martin fight. He beat up Rocco Martin with calf kicks. I love his stepping knees. He still pulls his head straight back, which I don't like, and stays on the center line. But when his opponent gets in the range, he's intelligent. He closes the distance himself. He initiates the clips. He wears on his opponents. He batters with knees and elbows. He's good at just like getting in the clinch and then just hitting like a quick slide by from the feet. He did it to Danny Rodrigues a bunch of times to like take his back that way. It's so funny, Neil Magny. He used to be a terrible wrestler, and he's still not the greatest defensive wrestler against the best in division, but he's become like a historically underrated wrestler. Like go back to like Danny Rodrigues, he took him down 5 times. He was relentless with mat returns. Now he has struggled to get back to his feet, like we mentioned, against Rakhmonov, against Burns, against RDA, against Chiesa, like the best of the best. And he's taken a lot of damage. So I know we're gonna have that fight where Neil Magny loses to not the elite, and it starts becoming a thing. Is it gonna be now? I don't know. Now Rowe's incredibly long and lengthy. I mean, the guy made Nico Price look small, which Nico Price is not a small guy. Sure, he didn't make weight, so that makes it a little bit easier. But yeah, you started it with all the comparisons to Magny, the physique, the backstory that we talked about, but also the way they fight. I mean, he moves well like Magny. He doesn't like being pressured. He wants to kind of like do a rangy kickboxing game. He can be a little low output, so I shouldn't say. Sorry, so I should correct that. He doesn't fight like Magny. There's some things he does similar to Magny. He doesn't. Magny's all about volume. Now he can throw some single strikes. He does well to keep his opponents at the end of the punches, but sometimes he's looking for the perfect punch. But his straight right, I mean, it's a deadly weapon. It's beautiful. He's one of the few fighters that he'll throw a straight right and then rip the body with a left hook, which is really a nice thing. I mean, go back to like the Orion Kosi. He murdered Kosi with body shots. Got some nice snap on his shots. Seems to be lately really packing on the power. Looking like he can hit a lot harder than when he first came to the UFC. He has 6 KO wins. Great kicking game. Though he doesn't kick enough. Like he needs to make it a bigger part of his game. I like his plum clinch. He gets in there. He uses his size well. Knees inside. He's not a strong offensive wrestler, but he's a pretty good grappler. He has a submission threat. If he ends up on top in a scramble, he's got some good ground and pound. Has a great guillotine. If you put him on his back, he will look a little bit, for BJJ. And the biggest concern I have is, despite getting a 3rd round KO against Nico Price, he was starting to slow down in that. And Nico Price hurt him a lot in that fight. But again, Nico Price hurts everybody in fights. So he's also like a guy that doesn't get enough credit for how hard he hits. Now, this is one of the best fights in the card. It's probably why I had a lot more notes. I mean, obviously I have a lot of notes on Neil Magny because he's been fighting the UFC so long, and we broke him down so many times. And he's also, besides fighting in the UFC so long, he's that guy that's always stepping up, always quick turnaround.
It's his 30th fight in the UFC.
Jesus.
I would be willing to bet that he has more UFC fights than everybody else from Tough 16 put together.
Oh, that's that.
Or no, wait, Sam Alvey was on that season.
Oh, Sam Alvey. Yeah. You are the tough expert. You're good at that stuff.
Yeah.
So this is one of the toughest fights because Phil Rowe has a lot of tools, and it is hard to really pinpoint what Magny does so well because it's like it's an internal thing with him. But I'm still taking Magny. He's made for that like 15 to 25 ish welterweights, and that's kind of where Rowe is right now. That could change. He beats Neil Magny, you're a top 15 guy, or you're the next guy when someone loses in the top 15. Sherdog, we're throwing, Rowe's name up there, but I still think Magny will have the advantage in the wrestling. I think he's going to close the distance. I think he's going to wrestle a lot. Give me Magny by decision due to having the more top control.
Yeah, if Rowe wins this, or better to say, if someone gets a finish here, I think it's more likely Rowe. He's the harder, harder single strike hitter, and as you kind of alluded to, at 35 with 29 UFC fights under his belt against some really heavy hitters, the moment where Magny's chin abandons him and his reflexes continue to slide, it's coming at some point. If it happens to be this weekend, Rowe by first round knockout is not out of the realm of possibility. Magny, over the course of his UFC run, he doesn't really have any bad losses. Just generally speaking, he's a guy who's good everywhere, and the people who've beaten him are just either better everywhere, like Gilbert Burns, or they were able to turn their one advantage and make sure the fight took place on their terms. Like Michael Chiesa is a better grappler than Neil Magny, and there was too much grappling in their fight, and Chiesa won. Lorenz Larkin chewed him up real bad on the feet. Rafael dos Anjos just took him down and bullied him. It's been people who do one thing better than Magny and were able to force the fight onto their terms. That's what I have a hard time picturing Rowe doing. It's kind of like I said about the Ricci versus Robertson fight. Like, if Magny loses to Rowe, it's probably because he obliged Rowe with kind of a middle distance striking battle for too long and just got caught. Failing that, I think Magny's the one who's more likely to win rounds, just as someone who throws higher volume and generally looks like he's winning the clinch exchanges. He's good at just reversing position, making sure he's the guy pushing his opponent into the fence. He's the one landing the little knees and stuff. And while it's a grind, it looks like Magny's winning it, and he is winning it. And then also, even and assuming Rowe makes weight, Magny's the guy that's more likely to stay fresher as the fight goes along, especially if he's able to force the pace that he wants to fight at. So all the variables here seem to trend towards Magny. I'm with you. Give me Magny to win a decision here and just continue to be the dividing line. I think you said it perfectly. He's the guy to separate the wheat from the chaff in that 25 to 15 range. If you're not ready for the top 15, you're not ready for Neil Magny.
Yeah, I'll say one thing. You said that the person the most likely get a stoppage is Rowe, and I agree with that. But I just want to clarify this. I think Rowe is the guy more likely to get an early stoppage.
Yeah,
I could see Magny getting something late, causing a long scramble, grabbing a rear naked choke, or standing guillotine,
or like you did the Hector Lombard, just getting the guy across and just beating the shit out of him.
Yeah, but an early first round stoppage might need that. I would be very surprised by that.
Yeah, Neil Magny does not have a single first round finish in his 37 fight career. So I say it's more likely Rowe. The UFC on ABC 5 main card powers on with a middleweight matchup between Brendan Allen and Bruno Silva. Allen, the 27-year-old, is 21-5 overall. He is 9-2 since joining the UFC out of the third season of Dana White's Contender Series, and he is on a 4-fight win streak. He was somewhat shockingly knocked out by Chris Curtis all the way back in December of 2021. That was part of the beginning of Curtis's surprising emergence in the UFC. But since then, he has back-to-back wins over Sam Alvey, Jacob Malkoun, Christoph Yatko, and Andre Muniz. The most recent of those, the Muniz fight, was a third-round submission in the headliner of UFC Fight Night 220 in February. That, without question, the biggest and most impressive win of his career. He's going to look to build on that momentum against a fighter who really is just trying to continue to stop the bleeding here in Silva. 33-year-old Brazilian is 23-8 overall. He's 4-2 in the UFC. He did win his last time out. He knocked out Brad Tavares late in the first round. at the Pavlovich versus Blades fight night in April. Prior to that, he had back-to-back losses to Alex Pereira and Gerald Mearshart. So Silva looking to put his first UFC losing streak further in the rear view here. He is not favored to get it done. Allen right now is around minus 160, Silva plus 130. Keith, off the top during the intro, I mentioned this is a card full of fighters whom I at least prematurely wrote off. And in looking back, now I'm like, why did I write off Brendan Allen at all?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, he had a loss to Sean Strickland at a weird catchweight, and he got Chris Curtis by Chris Curtis. And aside from that, all he has is pretty dominant wins over fighters ranging from solid to extremely good.
Yeah,
like I'm not sure what was wrong with me, but Brendan Allen is still a really good fighter, and he is still just 27 years old. Whereas, man, Bruno Silva against Brad Tavares, he really, like I said, he stopped the bleeding, because before that, his stock was plummeting about as hard as anybody in that division, just in terms of he started losing, how he looked in his losses, how he looked physically. Do you still hold out any hope for him as a future contender? I mean, he's someone who broke all the way into the top 10 of the Sherdog rankings before the bottom fell out.
Yeah, I don't know, man. That's I don't know. I think I've given up on him, but I've given up on other guys before. I mean, listen, I know I always go to this example, and I'm not saying that Silver is this, but like everybody on earth gave up on Robbie Lawler.
Yep.
When Robbie Lawler got brought back to the UFC, it was supposed to be we need Josh Koscheck to get a win. Let's give him a pretty decent name. And everyone thought Josh Koscheck was going to destroy, Robbie Lawler. Then when Robbie Lawler won, it was like, oh, that's even better now. Now we can get the next big GSP, Rory McDonald, over by beating Robbie Lawler coming off the win. And then it was like, wait, this MFR keeps winning.
Yep.
So.
Oh, well, I mean, you remember you've seen the Back to the Future movies.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, of course. In the first one, there's the whole gag about how Doc Brown asks Marty, who's president of the United States in 1985, and he says, Ronald Reagan.
Oh, yeah.
And he goes, what, the actor? And just starts laughing him off. Imagine if somebody showed up in a time machine and told you that Charles Oliveira was UFC lightweight champ in 2021. I think
you're going to make a Trump one, like Trump. No. What was this show? The Apprentice.
Yeah, The Apprentice.
All joke aside, and I'm not trying to get political.
Yeah.
But go back to when was Apprentice? 2005? I don't know.
Yeah, like early 2000s. Yeah.
Yeah. If you said that guy was going to become president of the United States. Yeah. So, and this is, I'm just kidding. I don't know how many times I got to say Trump, but I'm hoping that gets us in the algorithms. I keep saying it a couple more times.
It's going to get us in some algorithms.
Don't at me, guys. All you guys like Trumpers or anti-Trumpers or anything like that. One thing what happens with the Shillan and Duffy show that's great is we're both two different guys from different political parties. So we love everybody and we hate everybody. So there you go. We got them all covered. Anyways, yeah. And someone can get Michael J. Fox in the algorithm. Maybe that'll help. Maybe someone's really looking for that's the chance. They're looking to watch Back to the Future 3 and they get this show and they become an MMA fan. Man, that's what happens. This fight, Brandon Allen, I'll say this, I was with you, man. Losing to Eric Anders, very early in his career, but still, those didn't look good. But wait a minute, hold on a second. Is Brunges and Dumas fight above this fight? It
is third from the top.
That can't be right.
That's when it was Dumas versus Puna Soriano, but it's not like Soriano was this huge A side. It's that high because of Dumas.
No. If this really, and this again might be just us taping and some intern didn't. You know what? Give me that. That'll be part of my job too. I have to make sure the website has the correct order as I go, as I'm lining up too. So that'll also be part of my 40-hour job. But Brendan Allen, he's a pressure striker with really good volume. He's a builder who just beats people with his cardio. He has some defensive holes, stands a little too tall for my liking. He's a big guy. Some of that just being a big, Brendan Allen's a guy that could fight a light heavyweight, have no problem. But he probably will as he gets older. But he fights behind a high guard defense. He also makes a mistake of overextending, overthrowing. Brendan Allen, he's going to get a little. It's going to be a war at times. Like that's just going to happen in his fights. He's been hurt a lot in his career, and how old did you say he was? He's
27.
Oh my god, that's crazy. I thought he's 27, but he's an old 27. He's taken a lot.
Dude, he's not even 27 and a half. Like he's on
he just turned 27.
Yeah.
But like, he's older 27. Like he's got a lot of experience, and he's got a lot of high level experience against a lot of good quality guys. So like I don't expect him to be competitive at 38, 39 because of the kind of damage he's taken. But what I love is we see that he's coming in his power. Like he's in his power and he's starting to hurt people. Great kicking game. I love that he goes to the body with the kicks. He's got a great high kick. Some of the best calf kicks in the game. A fight that he lost against Sean Strickland, he had a lot of success just kicking him. He will wrestle. He's definitely not your traditional explosive wrestler, but he's a guy that he keeps a scramble going, funk style wrestler, and he usually wins the positions. Really mean ground and pound. I never viewed him as this great BJJ practitioner, but that isn't the case anymore. I mean, he advances position well in the back. He's got good slick back takes. I know some of it was just winding a guy down and getting him tired, but I mean, subbing Andre Muniz is crazy impressive. And not to mention, he swept them, and he had moments he swept other guys. Move over to Bruno Silva. I can't get the fight out of his mind against Gerald Mershad, where he looked terrible against Gerald Mershad. But then he returns and he knocks out Brad Tavares, which I thought at that time might have been a better win than, that means more to me than losing to Gerald Mershad. But I'm starting to think that Brad Tavares might be shot, which is sad because he's our token middleweight. But he fights out of both stances. He throws a lot of looping power shots. He has serious power if he connects, but he really overextends on his shots. He also throws from his hips, so beating him at the point of contact is fairly easy. He gets tagged too much for my liking. Even the guy like Jordan Wright was catching him with big shots before he got caught. He'll throw some fun stuff out there. I'll say that. Like he's entertaining. He'll throw a flying knee. He's strong in the clinch. It's going back a while ago, but they go back to like the Alexander Slemenko fight where he beat up Slemenko in the clinch. But he's not much of an offensive wrestler, and he's a weak defensive wrestler. Wellington, Turman, Andrew Sanchez, Jared Mershad, they all took him down. He struggled to get back up. He has a BJJ black belt, but I don't think he has. Does he have a single submission in his career? Like I have that in my notes. Like he hasn't subbed anybody, right? Zero. So that's
no. He's got that Vitor Belfort like black belt.
Yeah, he's got that like everybody like there was, if I went back 15 years ago, I knew about 3 people who were my friends who train BJJ. And now it's like I have 3 friends who don't train BJJ. I feel like this is a big step back for Allen after his last win. I think he's better than Bruno everywhere. I think he's bigger than him. He's faster than him. He's more technical. He's more powerful. He's a better wrestler. He's a better submission threat. I really think Silva's only chance is to land a big haymaker. I don't see that happen. I think Allen styles on him on the feet, and I think he puts him out early. What would you say the odds were in this?
Allen minus 160, Silva plus 130.
That's bet on that. He should be minus 360. Yeah, give me Allen by second. I'll say second round knockout.
Yeah, I like a lot of what you put out there. Allen, I think it was his last fight, the Muniz fight, where I made this comparison, but there's a lot about him that reminds me of a young Luke Rockhold. Just presents as big for the division. His kicking is the best part of his striking game to this point, sure. And he has some defensive liabilities, especially to his opponent's punches, and he's actually a better grappler than anything else. All things that were true of Rockhold, especially in Strikeforce and like his very early UFC run. And Allen is kind of right on schedule. I mean, I'm not saying he's the next Luke Rockhold or he'll continue to have parallels, but at just 27, he's still improving. And yeah, stuff's starting to come together. The Andre Muniz, when I picked Muniz with confidence in that fight, Same. Couldn't have been more wrong. And the way he won was super impressive. Yes, you mentioned he hurt Muniz and was getting him tired, and that's when he really started to roll downhill on him. But even when they were both relatively fresh, he held his own on the ground with a very, very elite MMA grappler in Muniz. I honestly think it should be almost like the BMF belt, and Brandon Allen should have gotten Jacare's arm to like take home with him. Like you get the Jacare's arm award. And
Yeah.
And the next guy to submit Allen should get that, like it gets passed along. Here, Silva, everybody loses in the UFC. And in hindsight, there's no shame to losing to Alex Pereira. He showed that he is a super elite middleweight. He got Mearshart by Mearshart, but the problem there is that it wasn't a Gerald Mearshart win.
No.
Normally Mearshart's getting his ass kicked and just finally finds a guillotine in the third round. So if you just look at it, third round guillotine choke, I can picture this fight, but no. How often is Mearshart the faster and sharper guy on the feet in the first round?
Pillar to post.
Pillar to post. Like Gerald Mearshart doesn't do that to people. He didn't even do that on the regionals before he got to the UFC. He's always been Gerald Mearshart, and that is alarming for somebody in Silva whose best tools coming into the UFC and in his early fights were his physical tools. Like he presents as a kickboxer, he calls himself a Muay Thai striker, but he's really a brawler with like a ton of power in his hands. That's what he really is as an MMA striker. But all of a sudden in that Mearshart fight, his body just physically looked different. He didn't have this outlandishly jacked physique. His gas tank was terrible. He looked slower. Like I hesitate to make accusations, like, because those can be damaging, but there are certain fighters that happens to after a certain amount of time in the UFC, and there's usually one pretty easy reason to point at. He looked better against Tavares, but we only had to see him work for about 3 minutes. I don't think this fight is probably over in 3 minutes either way. We're going to get to know a little bit about what Silva's athleticism and gas tank look like, because I'm thinking this probably goes at least into the second round. But I'm with you. I think Allen is better everywhere. And unless he does leave his chin out and gets it checked by Silva, I think it's going to be either a long night for Silva or a relatively short one. Give me Allen by second round submission, probably a club and sub type thing where he hurts him, pounces, takes his back and chokes him out and makes it look real easy. Next up at UFC Jacksonville is a featherweight matchup between David Onama and Gabriel Santos. Onama, the 29-year-old, is 10-2 overall. He is 2-2 in the UFC. He is 2-1 at featherweight. He made a short notice debut up a weight class against Mason Jones all the way back in October of 2021, lost a unanimous decision. He then dropped back down to 145 pounds, where he has wins over Gabriel Benitez and Garrett Armfield and a loss to Nate Landwehr. The most recent of those, the Landwehr fight, was last August at UFC on ESPN, Vera versus Cruz, where he dropped a unanimous decision. So he'll be looking to get back on track a good 10 months later against Santos. 26-year-old Brazilian is 10-1 overall. He is 0-1 in the UFC. He came to the UFC as an undefeated prospect, debuted at UFC 286 in March, dropped a split decision to Laron Murphy. I would call it contentious, but it's more consensus than contentious. The Santos-Murphy fight, 18 people on MMA decisions thought Santos won it, 2 thought Murphy won it. So you can make an argument that Santos should still be undefeated, but at any rate, he is favored to get back on track here. He is a greater than 2-1 favorite out there around minus 225, minus 230 or so. Onama is plus 180 as the underdog. Keith, 2 pretty impressive prospects here in the featherweight division meeting. I love the matchup. Tell me if you like it and tell me who you think wins.
Yeah, I agree. Again, I know I'm sounding like a broken record today, but I'm saying that, we're taping a little earlier than we normally do. So we're not super confident this is going to be the set order. I would be surprised if it's this high up the card. But talent-wise, it should be. Now merit is a little different, but based on what these guys can do, I'm excited for both guys. I really, really am. And I'll start with Onama. Yeah, he's a striker that, you know, he can fight out both stances. I like his volume. He's quick. He's explosive. Not much tells. I like the variety in his striking. Mixes things up really well. He's got huge power, and that's because he puts himself in, you know, in position to land a big shot. But he also puts him in a position to be countered, which is a little concerning. He actually slips the wrong way to set up his shots. He actually slips to his opponent's power, which is well, not always, but a lot of times. He can also overthrow. But I like that, you know, for a young fighter to go to the body as much as he does is very intelligent. He likes stepping knees. He will drop his hands, which is concerning. And he also a guy he'll invite a brawl. Like he likes to get down in the pocket, just throw wildly. He has some hard calf kicks, though he doesn't set him up. He's a good grappler. You know, you think about him as a explosive striker, but he can grapple a little bit. He's, you know, he doesn't really shoot. He's more of like a snatch single type guy. He isn't a strong defensive wrestler. They go with like the Mason Jones fight where Mason Jones took him down 8 times. But he has 4 submission wins. I mean, he subbed Garrett on field. But yeah, he gassed against Nate Landwehr. But like Nate Landwehr does that to a lot of people. So it's not surprising for a young fighter to kind of to not move around, not use, you know, his opportunities to rest, you know, really try to match Landwehr's power and can then kind of crumble under that. Just showed a little bit of inexperience, but to his credit, he took a beating and didn't give up and showed a lot of heart. Now, will that beating follow him? You know, being how, you know, that he's, you know, younger, I don't think so, but possibly. Santos, very similar, like very pressure striker, good output, builds as the fight presses along. I love that he cuts angles really well. And he cuts angles when he switches. Like he'll switch and then cut that angle. So it's like not only did I switch the stance, but now I've also switched an angle coming at you. So really gets his opponent guessing. He also moves a lot. He's very like herky jerky and unorthodox. So that's kind of, you know, I'm sure it takes a while for his opponent to kind of pick up what he's doing. But he's a pressure counter striker. So he pressures, but then he's gonna like he wants to slip something and then come back with like a combination. His slip left hand is a beautiful thing. I like that he throws a lot of straight punches. Definitely more polished than Onama is, where Onama is more just I'm going to kill you with my speed. Another guy that works the body well. He throws a lot of kick, definitely more kicks than Onama, though he does throw some naked leg kicks. He loves a flying knee. He's a good wrestler. He'll shoot, and he's definitely a submission threat, which I like. You said the lines. I'm sorry. What was the lines? It was pretty big.
Yeah. Santos is minus 230. Onama plus 180.
I'm surprised. I think it should be like minus 130. I know Santos looked really good in his last fight, and Onama, he looked good early against Nate Landwehr, but he looked, you know, bad late. So that might be a little bit of recency bias, which is really what the line should be, but what they've done recently. So I'm not like complaining about that. I just think it's a little off. I think it should be closer to a pick'em. I think Onama has more raw tools. I think he actually might have, I don't want to say he has a more upside, but he's got a lot of upside. That's what I'll say. I'm still going to go with the more polished fighter. I think we have a back and forth affair, and Santos, I think, tires him out with his volume and his takedown attempts. I think Santos, I think it's going to be close for about midway through this fight, maybe even a little bit deeper in the second round. But I think Santos pulls away as the fight drags on. Give me Santos by decision.
Yeah, I'm with you on just about all of that. Two guys with, again, significant upside. You and I said this about Onama ahead of his short notice debut, that he was a guy who belonged in the UFC anyway, and maybe this was just a little sooner than we were expecting. I still feel that way, and I feel as though he's more or less developed as expected. He was a guy that was probably always going to take a loss or two on the way to whatever his ceiling was. One thing I like is anytime a former Glory MMA and fitness fighter has fought for the first time since the implosion of that camp, I always try to track where they went to continue their training. He went to Factory X, which I think is a sensational choice for someone in that general weight range. They just have a ton of stud 145, 155 pounders. So
Yes.
I like that. And I wouldn't be surprised to see him improved. I mean, he's been away for 10 months.
Yeah.
He's
Agreed.
been with a real solid camp, training at altitude. That spells good news. And maybe that'll make him less likely to fade late. Nonetheless, I am leaning Santos here as well. He looked really impressive against Murphy. Again, I was one of the ones who scored that fight for Santos. So in my book, by all rights, he should still be undefeated, and he'd probably be in an even more high-profile matchup than this right now. Like if he came into the UFC 10-0 and beat Laurent Murphy in his debut, like he'd be getting some buzz. Maybe that will allow him to develop in the shadows for a little longer, but I think he has a breakout performance here. Give me Santos to win all 3 rounds against Onama in a fight that is more competitive round by round than the scorecards would seem to indicate. At least as the card is currently constituted, even on the UFC's own website, third from the top at UFC on ABC 5 is a middleweight matchup between Cedric Dumas and Cody Brundage, who steps in on short notice. Brundage, the 29-year-old Michigan native, is 8-4 overall. He is 2-3 since joining the UFC as a veteran of the 4th season of Dana White's Contender Series. He fought there and lost to William Knight, of all people. Went back and won another fight in LFA, then was signed to the UFC, where he is on a 2-fight losing streak. He was tapped out by Rodolfo Vieira back in April at UFC on ESPN Song versus Simone. Prior to that, he fought last December where he was knocked out in the first round by Michal Oleksiejczuk. So he'll be looking to get back on track here. He steps in for Punahele Soriano on 9 days' notice to face Dumas. The 27-year-old Florida native is 7-1 overall. He's 0-1 since joining the UFC as a veteran of the 6th season of Dana White's Contender Series. He debuted in March at UFC Fight Night Jan versus Dvalishvili, where he got choked out in the second round by Josh Fremd. Odds slightly favor Brundage. It's close to a pick'em, but Brundage right now is around -120, Dumas -110 on most of your books. It's interesting. Dumas was actually a little more of an underdog to Soriano. Like Soriano was like -140 or -150, but I think Brundage is actually a tougher matchup for him, except maybe for the short notice thing, because Soriano was probably going to give Dumas the kind of stand-up brawl that gives him his best chance of victory, whereas Brundage is going to wrestle.
Yeah, I'm surprised Dumas took this fight, but you know what? He probably thought he was going against Amanda Brundage.
And he's like, oh, I could hit me some women.
Yeah.
If you go back to our preview for his UFC debut against Josh Fremd, you will get the notion that
he's a terrible human being.
Yeah. And honestly, convictions, you can make the argument that anybody deserves a second chance, but he has convictions and open cases. Anyway, the real problem, as far as his UFC upside, if any, he's a tall, lean kickboxer with fast hands, fast feet, good one-shot power, doesn't throw in combination as much as you'd like, but it just didn't translate against Josh Fremd. Like, I don't consider Fremd an above-average striker for a UFC middleweight. And Fremd was handling himself just fine on the feet, and then on the ground, he exposed Dumas's deficiencies quickly and brutally. I don't know how long Cedric Dumas will stick around in the UFC, but barring some shocking skills development, his best chances of winning are going to be against people who are going to come straight at him throwing punches, because they're the people that he's going to be able to line up for the kind of body and head kicks that were his best weapons in his brief regional career. Brundage is, very much an old school throwback, wrestle boxer / wrestling convert to MMA. And he's limited by his athleticism. He's neither a huge middleweight nor much of an athlete. He's going to be a grinder for as long as he sticks around, but he has generally been smart enough to fight the fight that matches his strengths up against his opponent's weaknesses to their best advantage. Like, he made a mistake against Rodolfo Vieira, but he won the first round against Rodolfo Vieira and then just made the terrible mistake of countering a takedown attempt with a guillotine, where it's like, dude, you better be real damn confident you can finish that guillotine. Otherwise, you just signed yourself up to lay down underneath Rodolfo Vieira for 5 minutes, and it didn't take 5 minutes. It took about a minute and a half. Against Michal Oleksiejczuk, I don't think he wanted to box him. Just Oleksiejczuk was too fast. He's a much improved fighter recently and has good power. If Brundage is smart, he's going to crash the pocket the first time Dumas throws a kick anywhere above like the middle of his calf and throw him on the ground. And from there, I think he can go to work. He's going to need to work quickly because as a guy who's stepping up on short notice and fairly short turnaround, I'm sure he doesn't have 15 minutes of cardio, especially for wrestling. But give me Brundage again to fight to his best advantage, get Dumas on the ground, and probably soften him up with some ground and pound, get some sort of submission late in the first round. Give me Brundage by first round submission here.
Yeah, Brundage, he's on the feet. He's like a karate type guy. He hangs his hands a little low, but he throws hard, and I'd say it's some plus power. I mean, he starts Tresean Gore. He almost knocked out Rodolfo Vieira in that fight. I say karate based on his kicking game. He throws he kicks everywhere. He loves the question mark kick. He throws a lot. He has a wrestling background, but he isn't good as a wrestler I thought he would be as entering the UFC. Now he will shoot and he'll get some takedowns, but I've seen him get sprawled on. He doesn't cut the corner well. He doesn't chain wrestle that well.
Nick Maximov out wrestled him badly.
Nick Maximov turned him into a takedown dummy.
Yeah.
Nick Maximov, I became a fan of Nick Maximov in that one fight, and then he wasn't what I thought he was. I'm always bothered. He ended up winning this fight, but we go back to like the Dolce Langbula where he was just eating nonstop shots when he was just holding on to a leg, which was concerning. Now, if he gets on top, he's got a pretty good top game. But again, like Maximov showed that he's a weak defense wrestler, and he's gassed out in the past. I mean, like the win against Gore, he was slowing down, and then Rodolfo Vieira, he slowed down in their fight. Now, I'm not going to talk about Dumas anymore, but his personal life, I don't think he should be in the UFC. But as far as his skills, he's a long and lengthy fighter, kickboxer. He's very explosive. He explodes at his opponents, throwing really big shots. He can close the distance really well. It reminds me a lot of Kevin Holland, where they just 1 or 2 steps, and because they're so long, they just in their legs and the way they move, they'll cross the cage in no time. He has massive power. That's all his game. He's just big power, hit a guy. Good kicking game, kicks to the body, kicks to the calves. Defensively, he backs straight up. He also was cracked by Josh Frem and hurt. He's not much of an offensive wrestler, and he's definitely a weak defensive wrestler. He does have some submissions, but I've seen him lose position, Russian positions. He did get a guillotine on the Contender Series, but he also gassed bad against Frem. Like, he was hurt, but he was also he was getting hurt because his gas tank went out the door very quickly. I'm with you. I'm picking Brundage. I can't imagine him not seeing Dumas gas hard, do the wrestling exchanges, and not saying, and then seeing his knockouts and saying, "Hey, I need just to shoot for takedown and get this down quickly." I mean, I want to see it. Like, I expect it to look a lot like the Langbula fight. Like, you look at Dolce Langbula, he's got muscle on top of muscle, and you're like, do I really want to swing it out with this guy? I kind of feel it the same way. Now Dumas is a different build, but long, lengthy, known for his power. I think Brundage gasses Dumas out, and I think he gets a submission. I say Brundage by second round submission.
The co-main event of UFC on ABC 5 is a flyweight matchup between Amanda Ribas and Macy Barber. Ribas, the 29-year-old Brazilian, is 11-3 overall. She is 6-2 in the UFC. She is 1-1 since moving up to flyweight. She started out at strawweight, made herself into a fringe contender, but decided to move up in weight, stepping in to fight Caitlin Chukagian. She dropped a split decision. That was back last May. She stayed at 125 pounds in her return to the cage at UFC 285 in March and won a unanimous decision over Viviane Araújo. She'll look to make it 2 in a row against Barber. The 25-year-old American is 12-2 overall. She is 7-2 since joining the UFC out of the second season of Dana White's Contender Series. She's on a 4-fight win streak, those coming against Miranda Maverick, Montana De La Rosa, Jessica Ai, and Andrea Lee. The most recent of those, the Lee fight, was at the UFC Vera versus Sandhagen card back in March and was a split decision victory. Odds here favor the Brazilian, Ribas, minus 175, Barber plus 145. Macy Barber, of course, yet another of those formerly hyped prospects that I may have written off a little too soon. Part of it, of course, is she came with such fanfare and didn't help her own case with all the big talk about how my nickname is the future. I'm going to be the youngest UFC champ ever. So when she lost an all-timer of an upset to Roxanne Modafferi, it was kind of easy. I mean, I didn't like laugh at it, like, you know, like some fans might have, but I was like, well, that's, you know, that was a little too much too soon. Knee injury aside.
Yeah.
Like, you know,
did she tear her ACL like 10 seconds into the fight?
She tore her ACL 10 seconds into the fight, but you know what? On one ACL, she probably still could have won a decathlon agast Modafferi. A more complete fighter would have found a way to win that fight anyway.
Youngest champion would have beat Roxanne Modafferi anyway.
Yeah.
She got a leg cut off.
Yeah.
It could have been like Band of Brothers, like a bomb could have exploded and she's still in the fight.
And in hindsight, that loss to Alexa Grasso has aged pretty well. And since then, all she's done is win fights against pretty good fighters. She is still well shy of, I mean, she's still just 25 years old. And yeah, the potential is still there. Tell me if you think she gets it done against the official proprietor of the Shillan and Duffy Cute Wildlife Sanctuary, Amanda Ribas.
Yeah. I love Amanda Ribas. I want Amanda Ribas to be my neighbor. Could she get it done? Yeah. I mean, the one thing about Macy Barber is, like, you know, for an elite fighter, she isn't the best athlete. Like, that's the thing that holds her back. But I always have to remind myself she's still only 25. Like, there's a reason why she was getting so much hype, because she was so young, and like she's still not in her prime years. So, you know, when you're grading her out and you're looking at her skills, it's still, you have to keep that in the back of your mind that some things you put negatives on might not be negatives moving forward. No, she's a high volume striker. She constantly is changing stances. She's pretty technically sound. The one thing I think she needs to do is change up her rhythm. I wrote this as a note in our last fight. She tends to attack the same way, the same rhythm. A perfect example of who she should learn from is Demetrius Johnson. The one thing I was always impressed with Demetrius Johnson is that he was never like he never got in the same rhythm like he's doing in dance. He'd always be changing up, always change up the speed of the attacks, change up the angle, shaking up everything. And she's a little flat-footed. She does best when she slides into the pocket. She gets in there and brawls a little bit, and that's because she has a mean streak in her. Like, she's the opposite of Manny Boss. Like Macy Barber is the one that, like, if she was my neighbor on the other side and I'm cutting the hedges, I'm making sure none of it falls on her side of the fence. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. So I also, one thing I also do like about her is she's coming into her power. Like that I can see. She throws a lot of kicks, something that she's really added into her game. And you know, I said that she's a poor athlete, but she does seem to be getting, like, her speed is coming back, which again, you know, I always wonder, like, we give other sports time to recover from injuries, and it's like expected. Like, you have that rookie running back who tears his ACL, and it was like, oh, well, next year he'll be good, but the year after it's going to be his breakout. Like, but we don't do that with MMA fighters. It's supposed to be like, oh, they're healed. Okay, they'll be perfect. Yeah.
See you in 9 months.
Yeah, that's just how it is. And I know, like, ACLs and all that, the technology is so much better than it was, you know, even 5 years ago, 10 years ago. But just something still to kind of remember. But I have noticed her throwing a lot more kicks. She likes front kicks. She loves question mark kicks. She throws them a lot. Good high kick from both sides. She throws it. Despite being only 25, she's taking a lot of damage, though. Some of it is because of her own flaws. I mean, she drops her hands. She isn't the best athlete to avoid shots. She pulls her head straight back. But also some of it is she's faced some good athletes. You mentioned she fought the champion, Alexa Grasso. She she fights like a meaner Jessica I sometimes, where she prefers to be the bully and march forward. But when she's forced back on her back foot, like against JJ Aldridge, she was losing. I mean, that was a fight a long time ago. I like her clinch fighting. She gets in there, she can like get a little muddy in there and just outmuscle females in close quarters. She did really well. I mean, it was a controversial decision, but that's one of the best things she did against Marina Maverick is she outmuscled Marina Maverick, who's known for her physique and everything. She's not a great wrestler. She'll kind of like almost dive into takedowns. And she's a weaker defensive wrestler. She couldn't get off the bottom from Andrea Lee. She couldn't get off the bottom against, obviously Roxanne Modafferi. And there's somebody else. Somebody else was taken down that she was struggling. I can't remember who it was. I'm sorry. But she's mean on top. Like she gets on top. She's got really good ground and pound, very like Aspen Ladd type, where she just gets like crazy, like how dare you play the music at a level 5 when I have my windows open, kind of thing. She got good cardio. I'll say that. Like when we saw her come from behind victory against Marina Maverick was starting to fade, and she was coming on late and probably won her the fight. And like, say what you want about the Modafferi fight, and I obviously I was joking about one leg, and there is some truth that like the best of the best would have found ways to win that fight. She didn't take the easy way out. Like she took her beating and kept fighting, which is something impressive. Now, I mean, I have so many notes on Maycee Barber for some reason. Amanda Ribas, very athletic, like completely different than Barber. Like that's the thing that jumps out to me first. Good movement, very elusive, very fluid, high output, technically sound to pick people apart from distance. Look at the Caitlin Chikagian fight. I thought she won that fight. Just to be able to like match technique with Chikagian is impressive. She's got fast hands. She's accurate, good variety in her attacks, good at mixing punches and kicks together really well. She likes some spinning attacks, which whatever. Judo background. I like her throws, her upper body locks. She does go for the head and arm throw, which I hate, but she hits it a lot. Smothering top control. She likes to pass on the ground. Her grappling is really good on the ground. I mean, I've said this past. She out-grappled Mackenzie Dern at large portions of that fight. And she's a submission. She's got 4 subs. I like Ribas here. I like her big too. I think she's better than Barber everywhere, other than maybe a dirty boxing matchup. But all the way chest to chest judo, like I favor. Like if someone gets a takedown there, I think that's Ribas. I think Ribas is faster. I think she's a better athlete. I think she's the better wrestler. I think she's the better grappler. I think she smokes Barber. I think this is a blowout decision win for her. You said the line was it negative 165 or something?
175. Yeah, minus 175.
I jump on that now because I think it's gonna get even bigger. I mean, I already what I say, Brendan Allen. I might, and I'm not a better, but like if you are better, like I don't mind Allen and Ribas parlay. Like I feel confident. I think both those lines are off. Give me Ribas and a blowout decision win.
Yeah, I'm with you here. I think the specifics of the matchup definitely favor Ribas, and a lot of it hinges on what you just said at the very end, that Barber's probably best strength relative to Ribas is dirty boxing in the clinch, but if they clinch, she's not going to get to dirty box for very long because I think she's probably going for a ride.
Yeah, I agree.
I could see Ribas hitting the silly head and arm headlock throw,
I agree.
from there. I don't know if Ribas will be able to string together enough wins at 125 to get into title contention. She still has occasional defensive lapses on the feet and can be hurt there, but I don't think Barber's the one to do it to her because I think Ribas is actually a more technical striker on the feet and probably has at least as good one-shot power, even if Barber seems to be improving there. So yeah, I think Ribas wins a pretty lopsided decision here. Barber has shown herself to be just incredibly tough and resilient, so I'm not picking the finish either. But yeah, give me Ribas in a pretty lopsided decision where there's just nowhere in the fight that Barber can really do much work offensively. I love that Ribas, she knows how she comes off and has a sense of humor about it.
I love her.
Dude, She had an interview, I think it was with Marcelo Alonso, where he asked her where it was for Sure Dog, but he asked her, why she doesn't have much of a social media presence. And she said, well, she said, I actually tried having an OnlyFans, but I must be doing it wrong because like a bunch of people signed up, but I guess they didn't want to see pictures of me playing with my dogs.
Yeah.
Like she knows exactly what
she wanted
OnlyFans are for.
Yeah, she's like super sweet, but like yeah.
And her dad is her main coach, and he's the one that taught her judo, and he's like a grandmaster. So you don't want to mess, dude. You show up with the Ribas out to pick her up for a date. You better have some flowers. Your shoes better be tied, like be a perfect gentleman.
You're home at 9:30 exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
9:25. You're dropping her off.
Otherwise, Marcelo Ribas going to twist one of your arms off.
You better look at his eyes when you shake his hand.
Oh yeah,
sir. Yeah.
That brings us to the main event of UFC on ABC 5, a featherweight matchup between former title challenger Josh Emmett and perhaps future title challenger Ilia Topuria. Emmett, the 38-year-old fighting out of Sacramento, California, is 18-3 overall. He's 9-3 in the UFC. He did lose his last time out. It was a second-round submission thanks to Yair Rodrigues. That was in February at UFC 284. Prior to that, he had been on a 5-fight win streak. At 38, seeing the window of title contention probably closing up pretty quick on him, this is a do-or-die moment, and he has a pretty rough assignment in the form of Topuria. The 26-year-old Georgian by way of Spain is a perfect 13-0 as a professional mixed martial artist. He is 5-0 in the UFC. He fought most recently in December at UFC 282, where he choked out Bryce Mitchell in the second round. Odds here, unsurprisingly, favor the undefeated Topuria. Keith, I'll leave you to guess. Does the line for Topuria, is it in the minus 100s, 200s, 300s, 400s, or 500s?
You gotta be pretty big. Maybe the 200s.
Topuria is minus 320, Emmett plus 240.
Wow, that's just the power of Emmett alone. I don't think it should be that big, but I understand that some of it's the way the force bets come in, but
of course,
yeah. I was gonna guess like 250.
And with Emmett's better name recognition, maybe that closes up closer to fight night. But tell me how you think this one goes, and I'll ask you, since we have a substantial underdog here, if Emmett wins, what does it look like?
Oh, he catches him and knocks him out.
All right.
Well, you know what? I mean, that's probably the best. But I mean, it could be like Calvin Kattar, where he just, he's throwing. I mean, that wasn't the most convincing win, but his best bet is he catches them or something. Or Topuria, you know what? Topuria tries wrestling Emmett. We haven't seen Emmett, wrestling too much, and he's just still, that's where he came from. He still has enough where he ties Topuria out by defensive wrestling, and then Topuria's tied, and Emmett just starts taking over. Is that the case? I mean, I don't know. It's really hard to have confidence in Josh Emmett for several reasons, and I like Josh Emmett. Like I as a person, like I love his like soft spoken, like he's like the guy freaking knocks you into next week, but he has this like super soft voice and stuff. It's like it doesn't match the way he fights, but it's hard to trust a 38-year-old coming off. I mean, I don't know if it's going to finish, but it's in the running for beatdown of the year. The way he got absolutely smoked by Yair Rodrigues. Now, in fairness, it was Yair Rodrigues. Rodrigues is a superstar that could win the title. Like we're not doing a prediction, we're not previewing, but like if Yair Rodrigues, you know how big I am on Alex Volkanovski, but my point is like he's fighting for the title, and it's not out of the realm of possible that he wins the title. And
as a 38-year-old taking on the fastest and most athletic guy in the division.
Exactly. That's another good point. Yeah, that's a very good point. Trying to match the speed of that guy. So this is, but some of it could just be bad matchup against Georgie, but there's also that possibility in the back of your mind that he could just be shot. And I think this fight will really tell us a lot. Now, if he gets smoked by Topuria, then it's again, it's a smoking to a really, really good stud guy. But if it's a blowout, then it's like, okay, like it's time for Emmett's on the decline. but between his age, the damage he's taken, think about what what Rodrigues did to him, plus the slew of injuries he's had. It is in that weight class. It is a really uphill climb for Josh Emmett. Now he's a short and stocky fighter, but the thing I'm most concerned is what we saw in his last fight. It was his footwork. I mean, besides the speed of Rodrigues, he couldn't cut off the cage. He was following. He struggled to get inside and get into the block, and that's where that's where he lives. Emmett lives on the inside. He's always had quick hands for a guy who's known for his power. He's got quick hands, but I do think there's some signs of him slowing the hand speed. But I like that when he gets inside, he attacks with combination. He has crushing power. He can knock you out with either hand. Left hook, overhand right. Though I think his short straight right is his best one because you don't see it coming as much. But he tends to throw haymakers to telegraph, constantly looking for the perfect fight-ending shot. But it can happen. The way he throws, throw a combination and throw that big overhand as the guy circles away. He tried it a lot against Rodrigues. Rodrigues just was never anywhere. He wasn't in the same neighborhood by the time he was throwing those punches. He's best when he sets up his power shots with a body shot because the body shot freezes you for a second so you can't get away. That's his best thing. Come inside, maybe catches Topuria with like a short left hook, then that straight right after that would be the best thing. But one thing Emmett also does, he throws those big shots. He kind of drops his hands a little because of it, so he's open to counters, which is disturbing. And he's such a heavy on his lead leg because that's another thing about him. He keeps his legs underneath him. That's why he draws so much power. But he's so heavy in that lead leg that it's really open to being kicked. And then obviously, this is a guy that's had injuries before, which is concerning. What would happen to his leg? Was it Cater? Which fight was it where he didn't tear both of his legs ACLs? Like
yeah,
the same. Was it Cater? It was Cater.
It was. I get the Cater and Burgos fights confused. It was one or the other of those.
Oh no, it was Burgos. It was Burgos.
Okay,
it was Burgos fight where he tore his ACL in both of them, which is crazy because that was actually the fight that he probably looked his best in his career. I mean, other than like these wonderful, unbelievable. I mean, like a big war and that he's right there and winning exchanges and stuff. So. One thing we're talking about exchange. One thing I've always liked about Emmett though is he tries to end the exchange. He's always trying to land the last shot, which is if you think the combination is over, you think the exchange is over, and you drop your hands. He's always got that one more coming after you, which is good. Not always, but a lot. I should say not always, but a lot. He has a wrestling background, but that is completely irrelevant. He never wrestles. I looked this up. He's got one takedown in his last 8 fights, so it's irrelevant. Topuria, he's so well-rounded. He's a wrestle boxer who he jumps right into range, landing hard hooks. He's very accurate. He loves his overhand right. He's got crushing powers. I mean, I always mention the Jai Herbert knockout is one of the cleanest knockouts you'll ever see. He sets up his power shots by getting inside, working the body. He struggled a little bit to get inside of Herbert, but then when he eventually did, I mean, it was picture perfect. He can eat a punch a little. He's more hittable than you think, and that's why a guy like Herbert was actually winning at one point. But he's showed that he's got a great chin, and he's a good wrestler. I mean, great. I should really say great wrestler, especially in the upper body. Like he'll shoot on the hips and come upside, and then like his hip control, his hip placement. He suplexed Yusuf Zalal in their fight. He took down Bryce Mitchell. He showed incredible takedown defense against Bryce Mitchell, who's obviously a good grappler himself. He's a BJJ black belt. Looks to advance position on the ground. He's a submission threat. I mean, he subbed Mitchell in his last fight. Very aggressive to get the sub. Loves head attacks, Darce chokes, anacondas, etc. He loves that topside guillotine. He showed how elite his grappling is, but not getting subbed by Ryan Hall. And he dispatched incredibly hard ground and pound. So I do think, you asked me, how does Emmett win? And I think his best chance, obviously, catching him with a knockout. But the way Topuria fights, he likes to throw it out of the pocket. So he might give Emmett a lot of chances, to give him a kind of fight where, it's not, he doesn't fight like Yair Rodrigues. He's not going to dance around him and move and excite you with kicks and all that. That's not, he kind of stays in that range. So he's in the danger zone, But this just feels like a passing of the torch fight. Topuria is more accurate. He's faster. At this point of the career, he's a better grappler. He's entering his prime while Emmett is, on his last leg. I say Topuria is too fast for Emmett. I say easy slides in and lands some shots, gets out before Emmett lands his haymakers. I think eventually Emmett's body just fails him from the damage he takes. I say Topuria gets him out of there the fourth round. I'll say Topuria by fourth round TKO.
Yeah, it's hard for me to see plausible routes to victory for Emmett here. Short of, again, Topuria obliging him with a throwdown in the pocket and Emmett just connects with something. He is probably the hardest one-shot puncher in the entire division, but man, Topuria is not that far behind. He is an incredibly hard hitter himself, and it's just shocking because of everything else that he does so well. This will be one of the very few occasions where Topuria is going to be the taller man in the cage. I mean, he is a stocky, compact, muscular featherweight himself, but he's got a couple inches on Emmett. Short of Topuria having a rough camp and a really hard weight cut, because he's
a big guy.
Yeah, exhibits some difficulty making the cut to 145. Short of that, I don't see much even making this competitive. And that makes me feel bad to say because Emmett's career has been fun to follow. I had kind of hoped he would have had a shot at the title earlier than he did, but just things conspired. And if he's shot, if that top gear has slipped a little more, if that chin has betrayed him, Topuria is not the guy he wants to be in there against. And I'm thinking, you said a changing of the guard. I think this is going to be another breakout performance for Topuria because he abused Ryan Hall, but as incredible as Hall is on the ground, his best chance of winning was like a Hail Mary submission, like really surprising Topuria. And Topuria just shrugged off what he tried and pounded him out with ease on the ground. The Mitchell fight, where Mitchell is one of the most dangerous grapplers in the division, and Topuria just fearlessly handled him down there.
Yeah.
That was a different look. And here, I could see him maybe not just hurting Emmett on the feet, but like ragdolling him on the ground in a way people have not done to Josh Emmett. If Topuria is, getting standing rear waist locks and launching Josh Emmett like he did Yusuf Zalal, it'll tell us some things about Emmett, but it'll also tell us that Topuria is even more special than we thought. And I wouldn't be surprised at all to see some kind of performance like that out of him on Saturday. Topuria, greater than 3-1 favorite for a reason. Give me Topuria here. I'm going to say third round TKO that probably he has to finish on the ground, but he wins the first two rounds with ease. Maybe we even get a 10-8 in there if he gets a takedown early and just starts really abusing Emmett on the ground.
Yeah, I just want to add some things. Like you talked about Topuria, if he struggles to make weight. Another thing you said, how can Emmett win? One thing about Emmett is he's the ultimate professional. Like he's got to come in shape. He's got to do everything. He's got to make weight. He's got to, he's going to give himself the opportunity. But you said that, you wish he would have got a title shot earlier. It's kind of hard when Max Holloway gets 3 shots,
Yeah.
Let me ask you this before we close up. Topuria, if he win, and obviously this, you'll talk on the recap show, but if Topuria does win, is he next in line for a title shot?
You could make a good argument. If he does it impressively, he could jump the line a bit, and there aren't that many people ahead of him in line. If he wins it all by hook or by crook, he's probably in a title eliminator in his next fight.
Yeah, so the most obvious one would be if Alex Volkanovski loses, would be a rematch. I mean, if Holloway got as many chances, then Volkanovski would get one. And the other person that might be ahead of him is if Aljo beats O'Malley, and he's talked about moving up. Maybe Aljo gets a title shot. But of the guys who haven't the rest of the 145 pounders, he'd have to be. I mean, the only other. What do you mean? You're going to go Holloway again? If Rodrigues wins, changes a lot of things. But I mean, he'd have to be again over Holloway if Volkanovski wins. Right?
You have to.
Yeah. All right. We're on the same page.
Unless they're trying to put a headliner in Holloway's hometown of Toronto,
Yeah.
All right. That's it. The Shillan and Duffy preview for UFC on ABC 5, Emmett versus Topuria, also probably known as UFC Jacksonville. Not sure yet what the tag is for that one. I've been Ben Duffy. He has been Keith Shillan. If this is your first time watching or listening to one of our shows, first of all, thank you. We do our best to bring a mix of in-depth analysis and the occasional historical aside or whatever we feel like talking about. Please do like, subscribe, leave us a comment in the YouTube comments. Keith and I both man that section, and we'd love to hear your takes on these fights. Let us know if you think one of our picks is way off base, and if you're right and we're wrong, we will definitely give you your props. But most importantly, join us on the recap. We are live on the Sherdog YouTube page, typically about 15 minutes after the main event, where we will talk about all these fights in the opposite order, starting from the headliner all the way down to that first prelim, talking about what was good, what was bad, what was surprising, what was controversial. There's always something. What's next for some of the notable winners as well as losers. And the live chat on the YouTube page is open that whole time. So we are taking your questions, your comments, and your hot takes in real time. We have a growing community of friends that hang out with us after the fights, and we'd love for you to join them. Typically, Keith is the one taking the captain's chair for that recap, but Keith is on vacation as soon as I shut up here. So it'll be sometime substitute, and my handsome offspring, Adam, who will actually be physically in town. He and I will recap that one live. I'll just pull up 2 mics and we'll sit down on the couch and talk about some fights. But please do join us. And between now and then, enjoy the rest of your week. Enjoy the fights. Keith, enjoy your vacation, and we'll check you out next time.